Chapter 252. Mo Jingshan stood there. He had given his suit jacket to Jin Wan, and he only wore a black shirt inside. He stood calmly and indifferently. He only glanced at her coldly before turning to speak to his subordinates. He did not look at Ji Mengran again. Call the mastermind behind you out. When Mo Jingshan finally looked at her, his tone was cold and indifferent. It was clear that he did not intend to say a single word to her. Ji Mengran was already used to his coldness and arrogance. Now that she was pressed down by his men and couldn't move, she was instantly angered. She glared at him. What mastermind? I've been going against Jin Wan for a long time. What mastermind could I have? Isn't the mastermind me? Isn't that how you guys usually look at me? Ji Mengran's emotions were a little agitated. When she spoke, she was almost roaring. However, the man standing in front of her remained calm and indifferent without the slightest reaction. She instantly felt that she would forever be a dancing clown in front of him. Ji Mengran's embarrassment turned into anger. I just can't stand Jin Wan. I just don't like to see the two of you pretending to be happy together without any qualms. Since you've caught him, you can do whatever you want with him. She was relying on her identity as Jin Wan's biological sister and the fact that Ji Hongwen and the Ji family were still around. Mo Jingshan would not lay a hand on her, let alone kill her. Mo Jingshan glanced at her indifferently. To be able to use you as a gun, how long has that person been unable to do anything to Jin Wan? How could he let a smart woman like you stand out to make trouble? Mo Jingshan. Ji Mengran instantly felt as if she had been insulted and said angrily, Do you know how much I like you? Is it wrong that I like you? But you've never been stingy enough to look at me. Since it was a marriage alliance, why did the Ji family and the Mo family choose Jin Wan? Where am I lacking? I can't accept it, so I wanted to use Jin Wan's unwillingness to be with you as an excuse to find an opportunity to get close to you. The person who denied your marriage was Jin Wan. Back then, the one who did not know how to cherish was also Jin Wan. But you've been protecting her all along. Why? Why did you treat her so well from the moment you married her? Why can I only watch from afar? Where am I lacking? Mo Jingshan's smile was cold and clear. You're far from it. You. Ji Mengran bit her lower lip angrily and glanced at the men around her. She opened her mouth and said to the man who was a few meters away from her, far from it? She is indeed far worse than me. If it was just a marriage between the Ji and Mo families, Jin Wan wouldn't be worthy at all. She's not even my father's blood relative. All of a sudden, the door to the private room behind Mo Jingshan opened. Jin Wan walked out and approached quickly. Pa! There was a loud slap. Even the men in black suits who were used to being calm all the time turned to look at her. Mo Jingshan's calm gaze landed on Ji Mengran's reddened face. His cold and indifferent gaze did not contain the slightest bit of warmth. Ji Mengran could not believe that she had actually been hit by Jin Wan again. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Ji Mengran's nails, which she had just done half a month ago, dug into her palms. She glared at Jin Wan. Jin Wan, the slap you gave me before, I'll definitely return it to you tenfold, 100-fold. Don't even think about having peace in this lifetime. When had she, Ji Mengran, ever been stepped on like this? Back then at the Ji family, in front of her father, it was fine if Jin Wan dared to hit her. But now, she actually dared to hit her in front of Mo Jingshan. In the past, in front of Mo Jingshan, she would at most be ridiculed. Ji Mengran immediately exploded. Like a shrew, she struggled to break free from the men's hands and pounced toward Jin Wan. Her stance was clearly even fiercer than when she was at the Ji family in High City. Just as Ji Mengran was struggling too hard and was screaming in pain from being held down by the men, a figure suddenly appeared by the elevator. Seeing the figure approaching, Jin Wan instantly frowned. At the same time, Ji Mengran was pulled back by the person who approached and fell into the man's chest. However, the man did not gently press her down and did not allow her to struggle. At the same time, the man's sharp eyes swept the corridor and did not linger on Jin Wan's face. In the end, because of Mo Jingshan's cold gaze, his eyes were stopped in the air. It was indeed Xing Yihan. From the moment she saw the cup of tea on the coffee table, Jin Wan had guessed it. Xing Yihan had been a doctor for many years. He usually did not drink coffee or drinks with any flavorings. He preferred tea, especially the kind that was not strong and was very light. Meeting Mo Jingshan's gaze, Xing Yihan's lips curved into a smile. He exerted more strength in his hands and restrained Ji Mengran, who was still desperately pouncing toward Jin Wan. Ji Mengran felt pain. This man almost broke her ribs, but he did not allow her to touch Jin Wan. The stinging pain was unbearable. Her eyes immediately turned red, and she screamed, "Brother Sheng! Let go of me. It's not the first time that Jin Wan has hit me. What right does she have? She's just a bastard who doesn't even know who her biological father is. Let go, ah." Ji Mengran's wrist was suddenly grabbed. The pain almost made her tears fall. Although Xing Yihan's action was to hold Ji Mengran in his arms, anyone could see that Ji Mengran was really in pain from his grip. He was indifferent to Ji Mengran's cries and screams in his arms. Instead, he raised his eyelids to look at Mo Jingshan in the light of the corridor. This was a man who looked elegant and indifferent but in fact almost broke the ribs of the woman in his arms. He looked noble, gentle, and meticulous. His handsome features did not reveal any violent emotions, but Jin Wan felt a chill in her bones just by looking at him. It was just like when she was young. When she was young, in the Ji family, he had a smile on his face, but he had forced her step by step. Facing Xing Yihan's deliberate stare, Mo Jingshan glanced at him mildly and said unhurriedly, "The blade you chose isn't sharp enough. You can only blame yourself for having poor taste. Even if you want to break her on the spot, the result will be the same. It's fine if you spill blood in front of me, but in front of Jin Wan, I advise you to restrain yourself. Don't scare my wife." Ji Mengran immediately looked at Xing Yihan helplessly. That night, when she was thrown by Jin Wan and Feng Ling in that haunted, abandoned area, it was Xing Yihan's car that stopped in front of her. But now, what did his words mean? Chapter 253. Xing Yihan smiled mockingly. CEOMO, his brows were tinged with mockery. I thought Jin Wan still had that female bodyguard by her side. As he spoke, he released Ji Mengran's hand that was about to break her bones and let go of the person in his arms without pity. His hand dropped down. Mo Jingshan calmly glanced at him and then at Ji Mengran, whose face was pale from the pain and who appeared to be deep in thought due to the current situation. Ji Mengran shrunk her shoulders, speaking with some dissatisfaction, "Brother Sheng, I know I was rash and didn't follow your original plan. But the matter between Jin Wan and I really can't be resolved with just a few words. I originally wanted to use Dad's name to trick her over. I know you didn't expect her to actually come here. I didn't want to drag you down with me, but..." Xing Yihan looked at her indifferently. "What's the use of saying these to get me off the hook at this time?" His voice was flat and emotionless. From the beginning, although Xing Yihan had the intention to help her, he definitely didn't want to drug Jin Wan or lure her here in such a simple way. Ji Mengran was indeed eager for quick success. Xing Yihan was a very patient person, but Ji Mengran couldn't wait any longer. Jin Wan drawled her tone lightly. "So, I was called to this place in the middle of the night. Do you have other plans besides this sister who has always disliked me and wants to hurt me?" Facing Jin Wan's cold question, Xing Yihan raised his eyelids, and his eyes were pale and transparent. He didn't answer Jin Wan's words but just looked expressionlessly at the elegant man standing under the light. On the night when Jin Wan was at Shine's dinner party, Xing Yihan had already met Mo Jingshan face to face. At that time, their cold eyes had already determined that today's ending would not be too peaceful. "I don't have other plans. Between me and you, do I need to have a plan?" Xing Yihan asked with a faint smile. His expression was unfathomable and annoying. Ji Mengran was unwilling to be ignored. She suddenly turned sideways and looked arrogantly at Jin Wan. You should have heard what I said just now. Jin Wan, you are not the daughter of the Ji family at all. Mom only married Dad after she was pregnant with you. Even if the marriage between them is real, even if you have been wearing the hat of the eldest miss of the Ji family for many years, the blood flowing from your upper body is not the blood of our Ji family. You used to be as proud as you are now. Jin Wan, for the sake of the fact that we've been sisters all these years, I don't care how many things you've taken from the Ji family that belong to me, but who do you think you are in the alliance between the Ji family and the Mo family? What right do you have to stand here and call yourself Mrs. Mo? Aren't you the one who should be ashamed of your inferiority? Although Ji Mengran's eyes were slightly red, her words were spoken with an extremely disdainful smile. She carried the bone-deep arrogance of the Ji family's true young lady as she coldly glanced at Jin Wan. Mo Jingshan did not look at Ji Mengran but brought Jin Wan, whose expression was unclear, behind him. He then turned to Xing Yihan and said mildly, the secret that Ji Hongwen hid for so many years was easily discovered by you when you were in the Ji family. Now, this secret that can't be considered a secret can only be used by Ji Mengran as a trump card. The reason you prepared for a long time as bait failed to become Jin Wan's bait and instead lured Ji Mengran? Xing Yihan sneered, but his smile did not reach his eyes. Since it can't be considered a secret, how can it be considered as bait? Mo Jingshan looked at him for a while and then turned his head to look at Jin Wan. After hearing Ji Mengran's words, Jin Wan did not speak. Or rather, whether it was the rumor that she was an illegitimate daughter among the socialites in High City or the fact that she grew up and gradually found that her facial features were not similar to anyone in the Ji family, she had long been aware of all this in her heart. Although she could not digest it now, at least she was not particularly shocked. Mo Jingshan was right. Ji Mengran was really stupid to think that this was a trump card against her. If Jin Wan was still the Jin Wan who relied on the Ji family in her previous life, she might find it hard to accept it. After all, the present was different from the past. No matter what the truth was, Jin Wan did not rely on the Ji family at all. What she had was only gratitude to Ji Hongwen and the father-daughter relationship that she could not bear to part with. Looking at Ji Mengran's arrogant eyes again, Jin Wan's eyes filled with a faint, calm, and cold smile. Maybe it's because I've never deliberately held on to what you value, so your self-righteousness can only comfort you in your heart. What else can it do? Ji Mengran's eyes narrowed. She took the opportunity to raise her voice to ask, in that case, you've never deliberately held on to your marriage with Mo Jingshan? Jin Wan glanced at her, her gaze clear. It's precisely because this marriage is the only thing I've ever held on to, and the only thing I've ever fought for is the man you've always wanted but couldn't get, that you hate me to this extent. You've disregarded our 20-year sisterhood, plotted against me, and even tried to kill me several times. You don't even know who your biological father is. Who gave you the confidence to stand here and say, Ji Mengran was about to retort, but Mo Jingshan had already held Jin Wan's hand. Without looking at anyone in the corridor, he walked toward the private room behind him. The private room door opened and closed, and Jin Wan was forced to enter. She raised her eyes to see the man's thin lips pursed into a straight line. He softly called out to her, Nuan Nuan. Jin Wan's heart, which had been wavering and unable to calm down, immediately calmed down. She opened her mouth, her voice cool and calm. My ability to withstand blows is better than you think. I'm fine. It's just that some things need time to digest. Mo Jingshan stared at her. Don't listen to anyone's nonsense about your birth. Find a chance to have a good talk with your father. The truth will never be as simple as what others say. Jin Wan nodded. He raised his hand to touch her hair, gentle and indifferent. You were drugged earlier. It's not suitable for you to speak too much with them. We'll talk about this when we get back. Jin Wan nodded again. She was not at a loss, but at such a time, she still listened to Mo Jingshan's arrangements. After all, he was considerate of her emotions. Coincidentally, she did not wish to be at daggers drawn with Ji Mengran. Although she did not feel much, her body was still weak. She allowed him to hold her, but did not let her go out. Chapter 254. After that, Jin Wan didn't know what happened outside. More than 10 minutes later, Mo Jingshan came back and took her away. Most of the people in the corridor had left. Jin Wan was wearing Mo Jingshan's suit. She heard the man whisper in her ear, "Don't say anything. Just go." However, for some reason, although Ji Mengran stood there biting her lips and did not speak, it was clear from her eyes that she hated Jin Wan to the extreme. In the end, in front of Mo Jingshan, she didn't dare to act rashly. At this moment, she was like a clown, gritting her teeth and glaring at Mo Jingshan. Jin Wan brushed past her. The two women seemed to be calm, but the scene was like an oppressive tsunami. As soon as she walked past Ji Mengran, Jin Wan suddenly stopped and looked at her flatly. "So, Mengran, we don't even have a biological sister relationship anymore, do we?" Even if what she said was true, that her mother married into the family after she was pregnant with Jin Wan, so her biological father was not Ji Hongwen, even if they had the same mother but different father and were related by blood, even that had been cut in half. When Jin Wan said this, there was no expression on her face, but her dark eyes and eyes made people dare not look at her, especially those who were guilty. "When did you treat me as your biological sister?" Ji Mengran was very guilty, but she still straightened her back. Seeing Jin Wan didn't speak, Ji Mengran was about to speak, but suddenly Xing Yihan gave her a lukewarm look, and she immediately bit her lip. Jin Wan curved her lips, smiling expressionlessly. "Indeed, you've never treated me as your biological sister. In this world, even the closest people can be separated just like that. Even blood relations can be changed just like that. Then, from now on, Meng Ran, I won't be polite anymore. You." Not understanding what Jin Wan meant by her casual words, she was worried that Xing Yihan would really be angry and refuse to help her after returning to High City, so she didn't dare to go too far in front of him. Ji Mengran stared at Jin Wan's back. It was a very light and calm sentence, but it made her feel an inexplicable chill in her heart. Mo Jingshan looked at Jin Wan through the light in the corridor. As she walked out, she seemed to let go of something she had been hesitating to grasp. He narrowed his eyes and said coldly to the people behind him, "Send second Miss Ji to Chairman Ji. As outsiders, the Xing family shouldn't interfere in this kind of family trifles." Mo Jingshan's gaze only lightly swept over Xing Yihan's smiling face. The corridor was quiet. "No, I'm not going to Dad. I'm going with Brother Sheng." "Shut up," Mo Jingshan said in a low and heavy voice. His cold eyes swept by silently and intimidatingly. Ji Mengran's shoulders shrank. Mo Jingshan's cell phone vibrated. He took it out, took a look at it expressionlessly, and then quickly answered, "What's the matter?" She didn't know what the other end said, but his voice was still flat and emotionless. "I see." After a simple conversation, he hung up the phone. Jin Wan had been waiting in the car outside the club. Mo Jingshan opened the car door, only to see the little woman wrapped in his suit sitting in the front passenger seat. Her eyes were fixed on her cell phone, but her fingers were sliding back and forth on the screen of the cell phone. She didn't look at anything seriously. "Do you need me to accompany you to see Chairman Ji?" Mo Jingshan stared at her face and said flatly, "Only he can give you the most accurate answer to the questions in your heart. Forget it. My father came here because of the invitation of a business partner. If he can spare time, he will come to see me. He doesn't want to talk about these old things, and I won't force him to talk about them. But no matter what, his feelings for me over these years are real. So what if we are blood relatives? After all, he treats me as his own daughter. If I ask him now, it will only hurt his heart." Jin Wan put down the cell phone and did not really call Ji Hongwen. Mo Jingshan's hand fell on her head. "It's good that you're open-minded. These things won't affect your future life. don't think too much. The truth will come to the surface. I'm here for everything, En. Jean Wan suddenly glanced at him. Then, is the person you want to marry the Ji family's daughter, or, it's you? Mo Jingshan interrupted her. It has nothing to do with your surname. Although she knew he would say this, perhaps women were like this. They would only feel happy when he said it. Therefore, Jean Wan immediately grinned, satisfied like a child. On the way back, Jean Wan looked at the neon lights passing by outside the car and said, I was wondering how Ji Mengran could have bribed Secretary Zhou. Even if she could get in touch with Secretary Zhou, she couldn't have bribed this powerful club in T-City. She couldn't have extended her influence to such a big club in T-City. Now it seems that I was right. When Xing Yihan left the Ji family, he had already set his eyes on the Ji family. When he returned to the Xing family, the first thing he wanted to do was to swallow the Ji family. Now Ji Mengran must have been seriously brainwashed by him. Even if she was sold by him, she would still happily count the money for him. It's not you who will be sold. The current situation of the Ji family has nothing to do with you. Hearing the man's words, Jean Wan subconsciously turned to look at him. Mo Jingshan stared ahead and drove carefully. Because of her gaze, he held the steering wheel with one hand and put down the other to hold her hand. Don't you want to see the Ji family being swallowed by the Xing family? I don't care about others, but my father has never owed me anything. Since I was a child, although he is a strict father, he has always been a good father. Jean Wan didn't say more, but in her heart, she still insisted on the original idea. No matter what happened to the Ji family, she couldn't watch Ji Hongwen get into trouble again. Even if he was not her biological son, the relationship between father and daughter didn't necessarily have to be related by blood. Ji Hongwen was a good father, and that was enough. Besides, there were still a lot of things to ask, so she couldn't make a conclusion so easily. The car stopped at a traffic light intersection. Mo Jingshan took a look at her and said calmly, all right. Although it was a very simple word, Jean Wan instantly felt as if she had taken a dose of tranquilizer. No matter how powerful the Xing family was now, if Mo Jingshan didn't allow anything to happen to the Ji family, even 10 Xing families might not be able to swallow the Ji family. Until the car stopped at the gate of a hospital in T-City. Get out of the car. Jean Wan was almost asleep in the car. Hearing the man's voice, she raised her eyes and looked out. Why did you bring me to the hospital? The man unfastened his seatbelt and casually answered her question. The pregnancy test you gave last time has expired. Don't you know it? Jean Wan immediately sobered up. She sat up straight and looked at the hospital by the roadside in surprise. Has it expired? Chapter 255. Miss G, your so-called body cold syndrome is medically known as uterine deficiency cold, which is also known as uterine cold. This condition will indeed affect the probability of pregnancy, but your condition is not hereditary, and your menstrual period is very accurate. As long as you take care of it properly for a period of time, there will be no problem. Speaking up to this point, the doctor cautiously asked, Miss G, because this symptom of yours is not inherited, I'm very curious as to what caused your body to suffer from such a severe cold. Maybe if we find out the reason, we can cure the disease completely and save more time. How did she suffer from the cold? Jean Wan didn't want to mention those things in front of Mo Jingshan, but now he had brought her for examination. Although Mo Jingshan had never asked her about these things, facing the problem of having a baby with him in the future, Jean Wan had to admit that she couldn't be careless. She turned to look at the chin of the man beside her, and after a moment of silence, she answered, the winter when I was 15 was very cold, and it was even colder in the month before the spring festival. That night, it was about -20 degrees. I was on my period, but because of an unexpected incident, I ran out barefoot in my pajamas and squatted in the snow alone all night. Then I was so cold that I couldn't think clearly. In order to stay awake, I grabbed some snow from the ground and ate it. The doctors in the consulting room looked at her in surprise. Jean Wan didn't look at them. Before the doctor asked, the man's eyes had turned to her. Their eyes met, and Jean Wan saw the silent emotion in the man's eyes. She knew that sooner or later he would know what she had hidden for so many years. The doctor asked her to lie down and re-examined her again. When they walked out of the consulting room, Jean Wan was still reading the diagnosis. It was not a serious problem, but she would need to drink Chinese medicine for 2 months to adjust. Mo Jingshan took her to the pharmacy to get the Chinese medicine. While waiting for the Chinese medicine to be boiled, he took her to a quiet VIP waiting room where no one would disturb her. When Jean Wan sat down, he pulled a chair for her and put aside the coat she had taken off. His low voice was filled with infinite tolerance and concern. "Are you cold? Put on the coat. I'll buy a hot drink." Jean Wan looked at the man's handsome face and shook her head. "I'm not cold or thirsty." Then she paused and said, "I told the doctor the truth just now. Why didn't you ask anything?" The man's clear voice was indifferent. "If you don't want to say it, why should I ask? Those old matters are just like the relationship between you and the Ji family. There's no need to cling to them. They have nothing to do with your future life. Let the things buried deep in your memories rot away. There's no need to pick up the unnecessary vines that need to be cleaned up. Do you know?" He smiled faintly. "How tight-lipped do you think Ji Mengran will be?" Jean Wan, in that case, there were indeed no secrets. Jean Wan supported her chin with one hand and looked at the doctors who were preparing medicine in the pharmacy across the street. She whispered, "There are too many embellishments in her words, but you've heard her embellishments, so I really have nothing to hide." "So, it's all true?" Mo Jingshan looked at the little woman sitting there with her chin in her hand. "The winter when I was 15 was really cold. I don't want to remember that kind of cold for the rest of my life," Jean Wan said softly. Jean Wan said softly, "That year, my father had just brought Shinharu into the family, and Xing Yihan followed his mother into the Ji family. Although I was arrogant and didn't get along well with them at home, because my father insisted that Shinharu and Xing Yihan stay in the Ji family, as a child, I couldn't say or do anything. At most, I dropped my things for a few days and left it at that. Xing Yihan is 4 years older than me. When I was 15, I was also ignorant and curious about love. I don't even know when he began to pay attention to me. In his words, it was probably because he had his first awakening of love, and he opened his eyes to me, his stepsister." Jean Wan paused and looked at Mo Jingshan's faintly raised brows. She knew that this was the first time she had analyzed her absurd past that could not be considered as her first love. It was indeed harsh to his ears, but at least he was listening patiently. "The more I ignored him, the better he treated me. In several months, he bought me countless such gifts, most of which were to make me, his sister, happy. Later, I became less wary of him and no longer kept him at arm's length. He also gave me a reader's souvenir from abroad. I liked it very much, so I reconciled with him in the way of a child. Later, Ji Mengran said that some of the things at home were given to me by Brother Sheng. The servants put them away, but Ji Mengran used them to try to drive a wedge between us. That spring festival, Dad and Shinharu took Ji Mengran to visit relatives and friends in a neighboring city. I didn't go because my period had a stomachache and I was alone at home. The servants also returned home early because someone in the family fell ill." When Jean Wan said this, she suddenly clenched her sleeves. "I didn't expect Xing Yihan to come back that night. I had just taken a shower and changed into pajamas. I was going to look for snacks, but I ran into Xing Yihan who suddenly came in. When he came in, he smelled of alcohol, very strongly of alcohol." Seeing Jean Wan's movements, Mo Jingshan reached out to hold her hand. "That's enough. Don't talk about it." Feeling the warmth of his palm, Jean Wan said, "It's all right. You've said that these are things that should be buried deep in my memories and rotted away. I'm saying it now to cut off all the rotten roots." She raised her eyes to look at Mo Jingshan. Who would have thought that the seemingly glamorous and enviable Miss Ji was almost raped by her stepmother's son at home when she was 15 years old? Although I grabbed the ashtray on the coffee table and smashed it against him, I was still frightened. Fearing that he would wake up, I ran outside. It was very dark at that time, and I didn't dare to run out of the G family's yard because I was wearing too little, so I hid barefoot under the old locust tree at the back and hid there all night. Chapter 256. Even though my struggle was effective and nothing irreparable happened, even though he stayed outside my ward for 3 whole days after he regained consciousness, even though he didn't eat or drink during the 48 hours I was in critical condition, and even though I was unconscious for several days, to me, the damage he caused was irreparable. So what if he was drunk at the time? That's not a reason. Jean Wan said flatly. My father was furious about this. At first, he admired this stepson and didn't mind that he was the Xing family's illegitimate son. But after that incident, the Ji family had no place for Xing Yihan. Shenharu also expressed that she wanted to sever the mother-son relationship. I stayed in the hospital for 2 months before I returned home. To uphold justice for me, my father kicked Xing Yihan out of the Ji family in front of me. At that time, Mengran cried and said that brother Sheng was drunk and didn't do it on purpose. She even tried to plead for him, but my father was really furious. He even warned Shenharu that if she dared to have any contact with this son again, he would kick her out of the Ji family as well. In order not to let this shadow haunt me, my father made Xing Yihan's name a taboo in the Ji family. No one dared to mention it. Later, I went to America to study and broadened my horizons. I didn't think about those things anymore. If it weren't for the heavy cold in my body, I wouldn't be so afraid of the cold now. I've always been very healthy. When she said the words, very healthy, to Mo Jingshan, she sounded a little aggrieved. Mo Jingshan looked at her expression and raised his hand to pinch her cheek. I didn't say anything bad about you. You should be thankful that what happened and you were a teenager didn't leave too much of a shadow in your life. What else did Mengran tell you except that I had a brief ambiguous period with Xing Yihan when I was 15? What else could she say? As you think, she exaggerated the truth. Why didn't you ask me? The truth filtered out from her exaggerated words was the embarrassing thing you encountered when you were a teenager. If you didn't say it, why would I ask? Would I personally peel open your wound and ask you if it hurt? Do you think I'm that free? This sounded very cold-blooded, but it also seemed to be the most considerate way for her. Jean Wan suddenly puffed up her cheeks unhappily. She leaned against Mo Jingshan's shoulder to say, no wonder Ji Mengran always speaks so confidently. No wonder she's always unconvinced because you treat me too well. It turns out that her mouth has long been dishonest. Mo Jingshan furrowed his brows. I've never seen her alone. Don't let your imagination run wild. Why would she need to meet him alone? With her all-pervasive personality, she doesn't even need to meet me to slander me. Speaking of this, she remembered that Xing Yihan had given her a watch last time. She looked up at him. So you knew I didn't take the watch last time, didn't you? The man stared at her. He knew that you wouldn't accept it, but he still gave it to you. The meaning of the watch is the bridge of lovers? Who do you think he was trying to disgust? That's true, Nguyen. He suddenly called her name. In the future, if he meets you again, or if he has any suspicious movements, tell me directly. Don't bear it alone. What did you guys talk about outside today? Will he still look for me? I just want you to remember, just in case. Jean Wan looked at his handsome face. She pursed her lips for a long time and suddenly kissed his chin. Why do you sound so calm when you hear that I was almost raped when I was young? Shouldn't you be extremely angry and want to kill someone right now? That's how it is in the movies. Even if I've already hacked him into pieces in my heart, what has already happened cannot be stopped. Mo Jingshan patted the top of her head. His voice was calm, but there was a hint of coldness hidden in it. Don't be anxious. I'll get it back for you one by one. Jean Wan suddenly smiled. She hugged him with both hands in his embrace. My dear hubby. I love you, Jean Wan said seriously in his embrace. The last time she said this, she was acting coquettishly. This time, she really said it from the bottom of her heart. The man smiled and reached out to hug her. He touched her head and chuckled softly. I didn't ask you to come to Tea City. I didn't see any results, but you've learned how to confess. At this moment, the doctor from the pharmacy came over to check the list of Chinese medicine. Mo Jingshan had Jin Wan sit there and got up to negotiate with the doctor. 4 hours later, it was already midnight. He finally got the decocted medicine and drove back to the condo. Mo Jingshan really did not let him handle the torture of waiting in the hospital. Jin Wan did not have to worry at all. She sat in the waiting room and slept for a while before taking the car home. After returning home, the man coaxed her to drink the medicine. At 1:00 in the morning, she drowsily held the bowl and drank it. It was so bitter that she almost cried. When she raised her eyes, she saw Mo Jingshan watching her. It was clear that if she dared to spit out a mouthful, he would take out another bag of medicine for her to drink. In the end, Mo Jingshan saw that she pinched her nose and drank the entire bowl of medicine. The color in his eyes warmed. That's good. Go take a shower and sleep. Jin Wan finally got it. She climbed onto the bed and lifted the quilt to sleep. However, in her sleep, she felt a warmth from the soles of her feet. She woke up in a daze and saw the man holding her curled-up body in his arms. At the same time, he held both her feet in his palm. The temperature of his palm was very warm. What are you doing? She was still sleepy and asked vaguely. Let me hug you, in the future, if your hands and feet are cold, just tell me. There will be something specially prepared for you at home. The man gazed deeply at her half-asleep appearance. Every time this little woman woke up in the middle of sleep, her drowsy appearance was especially tempting. His Adam's apple moved up and down. When she nodded with an N in response, he bent down to kiss her brows. 2 words came out of his throat: go to sleep. Mo Jingshan would be staying in Tea City for half a month. During this time, Jin Wan had no chance to return to the dormitory. Of course, it could also be said that she had no intention of returning to the dormitory. After Boss Missouri returned to the condo after work, the first thing he did was to cook for her. This was a treatment that she did not receive even when they were in High City. However, it was impossible for Mo Jingshan to personally buy the ingredients. The ingredients were all delivered by the auntie he hired every day. He would wash them in the kitchen and leave them in the kitchen. Chapter 257. On this side, Jin Wan ran back and forth to help Mo Jingshan. Previously, she thought she could keep this man's stomach with her cooking skills. But now, she was kept by him. Do you want a plate? Do you still have vegetables to wash? Do you want to cut the ginger for you? What about garlic? Do you want it? She was doing all these chores now, and she had forced herself to do it. Otherwise, Mo Jingshan would basically let her sit on the sofa and watch TV, not allowing her to touch anything. She really felt bad, so she ran over to help him. During the meal, Mo Jingshan glanced at Jin Wan, who was enjoying the food with her cheeks puffed up, saying, this weekend, several leaders from Tea City's Teaching Tools Bureau have an appointment with the leaders of Tea University. I've been pushing this dinner away for several days, but I still can't turn it down. Do you want to go with me? School leaders? If I go, won't I be exposed? The school leaders are different from your classmates. After knowing you are Mrs. Mo, they will be tight-lipped. You don't have to worry about this. I'll think about it. You still need to think about it? Your principal has already prepared to bring his daughter, who has just graduated with a master's degree, to this dinner. He has introduced his daughter to me several times. Are you sure you don't want to go? Why are you glaring at me? Mo Jingshan, don't you think you have too many rotten peach blossoms? Which rotten peach blossoms have I seen too many? Jin Wan chewed hard in her mouth, realizing that if she hadn't insisted on coming to Tea University, Mo Jingshan would not have been so close to Tea University. If he hadn't approached the principal, he wouldn't have been delusional enough to introduce his own daughter to him. But in the end, wasn't it because he was too attractive to women? TSK, she really wished he could be like some religious people who covered their entire body and only revealed a pair of eyes to walk the world. Perhaps then he would attract fewer peach blossoms. If I go, do I have to introduce myself? Do you think I'm a new student? What if the principal sees me and chases me away as a student? If they ask me who I am, what should I say? My wife. Do you have to be so direct? Mo Jingshan glanced at her. What do you think I want to do? You want me to fight 300 rounds with the principal's daughter? Jean Wan raised her brows. You think too highly of me. Mo Jingshan chuckled. Your principal only has this intention, but he didn't say it clearly. It's just a meeting. After seeing the situation clearly, he won't force it. It's just an ordinary social event. Mrs. Mo, are you too embarrassed to go? What's there to be embarrassed about? So are you going or not? Jean Wan put down the bowl and exhaled. Go. You found a husband yourself. No matter what, you have to keep him in your pocket. You can't give him any chance to cheat. Ahem, I mean, we can't give others the chance to dream. The weekend dinner was right after Jean Wan's class. During the day, Professor Lin had specially emphasized that he was busy tonight and that if the students had any questions, they could call him the next day. It was obvious that Professor Lin would be there tonight. Although it was a social event, these people were from the Teaching Tools Bureau and the school leaders, and the way they treated them was very formal. They chose a good hotel for dinner instead of those messy entertainment clubs. Seeing that it was almost time, the principal of T University finally persuaded his daughter to come. The school leaders and the people from the Education Bureau were all looking forward to Mo Jingshan's arrival. Mo Jingshan arrived at the hotel at 7:30 on time. When he pushed the door open and came in, the dozen or so people in the hotel room all looked at him and then subconsciously glanced at Jean Wan behind him. They didn't expect that CEO Mo not only came today but also brought another girl. And she was a very beautiful girl. She had long straight black hair, white skin, big eyes, narrow eyelashes, a fair and beautiful oval face, and a well-proportioned figure. She was wearing a casual dress that had no brand logo but was very stylish. Her long legs were straight, and she was young but not too tender, mature and stunning. When the leaders in the room saw the girl behind Mo Jingshan, they all subconsciously glanced at the principal's daughter who was sitting at the table and then at Jean Wan. Jean Wan met everyone's gaze and smiled calmly. She looked around and finally met Professor Lin's eyes. She nodded to him respectfully. Hello, Professor Lin. Professor Lin's eyelids twitched. He had felt that Jean Wan, this little girl, must have a special relationship with CEO Mo, but he didn't expect that CEO Mo would bring her here today. The school leaders also had a little impression of Jean Wan. They immediately looked at her differently and didn't quite understand what was going on. Among the leaders of the Education Bureau, there were several young men in their 30s who were sitting on the principal's side. The moment they saw Jean Wan, their eyes lit up. Jean Wan naturally met their eyes and walked over to sit down with Mo Jingshan. The men in their 30s, seeing that Jean Wan seemed to be Professor Lin's student, subconsciously looked at her and asked cautiously and politely, CEO Mo, this is? My wife, Jean Wan. Mo Jingshan's thin lips curved slightly, introducing her without hesitation. In an instant, everyone at the table was even more surprised. The expressions of the leaders who had an impression of Jean Wan stiffened. Wife? The principal looked at Jean Wan in disbelief. When did CEO Mo get married? Miss G, if I remember correctly, isn't she the student in our T University's Professor Lin's class? My wife has nothing to do and opened a studio in High City. She thinks that her management skills are not good enough, so she took some time to come to T City to learn business management. Mo Jingshan's clear and indifferent tone seemed to be talking about something that couldn't be more ordinary. But to the others, it was not so ordinary. The dignified Mrs. Mo came to T University to study, but she had been low-key and never revealed her identity. She was even the top student in Professor Lin's class. This was really incredible. At this moment, Jean Wan saw the young girl sitting by the principal's side. However, the other party's expression was slightly strange. It seemed like she was undoubtedly the principal's daughter. "Nice to meet you, principal." "Nice to meet you all. I'm really here to study business management at T University. After all, I'm here to study hard, so I didn't specifically introduce myself. Professor Lin and my father are old acquaintances, but he doesn't know much about my marriage. I've never told him about it." Jean Wan spoke gracefully and turned to Professor Lin. "Professor, you won't blame me, right?" Chapter 258. The fact that Imo Jingshan was already married was undoubtedly a bomb, blowing up everyone present and causing them to be unable to react for a moment. The young girl sitting beside the principal, although her stunned expression when she saw Imo Jingshan earlier was now a little more restrained, her gaze clearly shifted back and forth between Jean Wan and Imo Jingshan, as if trying to determine whether he was really married or just found a random woman to be his shield. Jean Wan felt that she had made the right decision to come today. Otherwise, if the principal really wanted to introduce his daughter to him, the result would only be unpleasant for both parties. Everyone had arrived and sat down. The school leader's adaptability was not bad. After being curious about Jean Wan for a while, they changed the topic. The table was full of people related to the education industry. Most of them were leaders with high positions, and the topics they talked about were basically the same. For example, a school leader poured wine for another school leader and said in a fawning manner, "Director Chen, there are fewer top students in the XX department this year than in previous years. Don't be too strict with the results of this year's exams. Please take care of our unpopular subject." Conversations like this were basically the same, and the topics revolved around T University and T City's education industry. Jean Wan listened to their conversation, eating quietly and appreciating the eloquence of these big shots in T City's education industry. The two leaders in their 30s picked up new chopsticks to put food in Jean Wan's bowl. After learning that she didn't drink, they eagerly asked the waiter to bring her coconut juice or a glass of lemon water. Jean Wan smiled at them and thanked them again and again. Under the table, her fingers were caught and pinched hard. Jean Wan felt a little pain and reflexively tried to withdraw her hand, but she couldn't. She turned her head and looked at the man beside her in surprise. Imo Jingshan pinched her fingertips with one hand, raised his arm to pick up the glass kettle by the side, and poured a glass of water for her. As he approached, he asked her in a low voice, "Why are you smiling so beautifully at me? Are you very happy?" "Jean Wan, didn't you ask me to come? I can't come here with a long face." In the next second, the man pinched her wrist and exerted some force. "I asked you to sit here and eat, not to sit here and laugh." After all, the two leaders of the Education Bureau were still young. Jean Wan smiled at them for a while and almost lost her soul. If they hadn't known that she was CEO Mo's wife, they would have been even more eager to see her. "But I can't be expressionless when I look at others." Imo Jingshan picked up a piece of beef and placed it in her bowl. "Just look at me. If you don't want me to show my face in public, then don't bring me here. You brought me here, but you won't let me see others. I asked you to come. Did I ask you to smile at others?" If it weren't for him, she wouldn't have smiled at these people she had never met before. But now that her identity as Mrs. Imo had been revealed, she couldn't be too cold. But since Boss Missouri had already spoken, at most, she wouldn't look around or smile at others, all right? Seeing Jean Wan lowering her head to eat silently, Imo Jingshan picked up some pepper from her bowl for her. Their actions didn't escape everyone's eyes, but everyone had a tacit understanding and pretended not to see it. They didn't dare to tease them, but they all knew the answer in their hearts. This Jean Wan was indeed Imo Jingshan's woman. Her words, actions, and the way they interacted with each other couldn't be faked at all. Even so, the principal's daughter sat there and watched. She suddenly smiled and her eyes fell on Jean Wan's face, saying, how old is Mrs. M.O. this year? There really aren't many people who would run out to study business management after getting married. Jean Wan hadn't swallowed the piece of meat in her mouth. She took a few seconds to swallow it. M.O. Jingshan ignored her, picked up another piece of cod, and placed it in Jean Wan's bowl. The atmosphere suddenly became a little awkward because of the principal's daughter's words. Everyone present could see that the principal of T University wanted to introduce his daughter to CEO M.O., but before he could extend the olive branch, the principal's wife was here. Although the atmosphere was quiet, the principal was about to say something to smooth things over, when the principal's daughter suddenly smiled again and said to Jean Wan, "Hello, Mrs. M.O. Please forgive me for not introducing myself just now. My name is Linda." "Hello, hello." Only then did Jean Wan swallow the meat in her mouth. However, because she swallowed too quickly, she coughed and choked when she opened her mouth to respond. M.O. Jingshan frowned unconsciously, pushed the glass of water he had just poured for her to her, and patted her back with the other hand. Jean Wan picked up the glass of water and took a sip, feeling much better. She immediately looked up at the principal's daughter with a smile. "I've heard that the principal's daughter graduated from a famous overseas school. Miss Linda, I've heard about you a long time ago." However, no matter how eloquent Jean Wan's words were, her actions with M.O. Jingshan were so natural that no one could interrupt them. The principal's daughter smiled. "Really? But I don't think I've ever heard that CEO M.O. is married." Sure enough, T City is so far away from High City that we didn't even notice the news of such a grand wedding. Jean Wan had already mentally prepared herself when she arrived. Right now, she did not have much reaction. Furthermore, this principal's daughter was clearly somewhat arrogant. Perhaps it was because she grew up in a school environment where everyone else was just an ordinary student, while she was the daughter of the high and mighty principal. Thus, she had developed an innate sense of arrogance since she was young. Jean Wan didn't speak but just smiled, acquiescing to her ignorance. Next to her, M.O. Jingshan glanced at the principal's daughter across the table, saying indifferently, "It may be too simple to just say that she is Mrs. M.O." Everyone was stunned. Wasn't it because they were married? Was there any gossip behind it? They knew it was impossible for M.O. Jingshan to get married so early. Perhaps, the words Mrs. M.O. were a little exaggerated. There should be some other complicated relationship between them, right? Jean Wan was also confused and turned her head to look at him. The atmosphere suddenly fell into silence again. Everyone at the table was curious but didn't dare to ask. The principal's daughter stared at Jean Wan as if thinking about the meaning of M.O. Jingshan's words. "Is that so? Then it seems that you'd better call her Miss G." The principal's daughter glanced at Jean Wan again. Jean Wan felt that she couldn't eat anymore. As soon as she put down the chopsticks, her hand under the table was suddenly held by the man's hand and held it. "She's the person I love very much. I love her so much that the word Mrs. M.O. is not enough to express everything." Chapter 259. As soon as M.O. Jingshan's voice fell, the whole table fell silent. Almost everyone had varying degrees of surprise on their faces. In the beginning, some people thought that M.O. Jingshan's marriage was related to a business marriage. Calling her Mrs. M.O. was probably just a wife in name, and their relationship was just that. After a long time, it was just a tacit understanding between husband and wife. After all, he was a man who could shake the world in the business world. There was no need to be too concerned about the small details. However, it was impossible for the great M.O. Jingshan to speak of his feelings for his wife in front of everyone. Besides, in this world, the word love could no longer move anyone. That's what they all thought. However, the man's calm and ordinary words made the principal's daughter instantly speechless. The expression on her face only twitched awkwardly, and she didn't dare to say anything else. Is CEO M.O. confessing his love in public? Don't tell me he confesses to his wife every day at home, a school leader asked with a laugh. It's the first time I've seen such a scene. How close must Mrs. M.O. and Mr. M.O. be to be so unequivocally loved by CEO M.O.? I've lived so long, but I still have to see such a scene of dog abuse. Yes, it's called dog abuse, right? It's a new term I heard from my students not long ago. Jean Wan's face began to burn. To avoid embarrassing herself with a red face, she hurriedly picked up the glass and drank the water calmly. The principal's daughter couldn't stand it anymore. She got up and left with the excuse of going to the bathroom. Seeing this scene, the principal also felt embarrassed. He blamed himself for not investigating Mo Jingshan's marriage before trying to matchmake Mo Jingshan. Not only did he lose his daughter's face, but he also made it so embarrassing. Then there were some flattering words from the school leaders. Jean Wan smiled politely, kept quiet, and ate the meat calmly. On the way, Ji Hongwen called. Jean Wan got up and went to the door of the private room to answer the call. Ji Hongwen said coldly, "I know what happened to Mengran. Don't take it to heart. It's not the first time this child has done such things. You gave her chances again and again, and now she even went to T-City to target you. Nguan, don't believe her nonsense. Dad will definitely give you an explanation." Jean Wan knew that Ji Hongwen had returned to High City today and didn't have time to see her. "It's all right. Dad, don't worry too much. I know what to do with Mengran." Standing outside the private room, Jean Wan held her cell phone and said softly, "You've just returned to High City. You'd better go to bed early. Your health is the most important thing. Don't be too angry and worried because of these things. Mengran has scolded you so much. If I don't punish her, I'll punish her. I'm afraid she won't be able to control you." Ji Hongwen angrily said, "I'll arrange for her to go abroad in the next 2 days. She's not even 20 yet and she's already idling at home all day. She's not like you who went abroad to study at an early age. I've really spoiled her all these years. I think if she really refuses to change despite repeated admonitions, we should quickly send her abroad. Out of sight, out of mind. Her hands won't be able to stretch so far and won't be able to come back and pester you and Jingshan." Jean Wan took a look at the time. "I'm eating out now. I don't know when I can go home. If you haven't gone to bed yet, I'll call you." Ji Hongwen was silent for a moment and then said, "Go on with your business. Don't call me." "But the things Mengran said to you, are you?" Jean Wan said, "Dad, although she always makes a fuss, some things are not groundless. I hope I'll always be your daughter, but I want to know the truth. Now that I've grown up, I hope we can find a chance to talk about things that need to be made clear." "All right. You don't have much time left to study in T-City. Let's talk about it when you return to High City." Ji Hongwen understood what Jean Wan meant. He couldn't comfort her by telling her to calm down and not think too much, because she was very calm now. Ji Hongwen's attitude confirmed what Mengran had said. Jean Wan agreed, said a few more words, and hung up the phone. She had just put her cell phone back into her bag and was about to go back to the private room when the principal's daughter, who had just gone to the bathroom, came back. Jean Wan nodded at her and stepped aside to let her in first. The principal's daughter didn't move but just stood at the door with a smile on her face, saying sweetly and softly, "Mrs. Mo, I'm sorry for offending you just now." As the daughter of a scholarly family, Miss Linda's EQ and IQ shouldn't be too bad. Although from a woman's point of view, Jean Wan could understand how she felt when she came here for a blind date, only to be interrupted by someone else. Of course, this was only from the point of view of the principal and the principal's daughter, but for Mo Jingshan, it was nothing more than a dinner that he had been trying to refuse for many days. "How long have you and CEO Mo been married?" The principal's daughter couldn't help asking. Jean Wan took a look at her. "We'll be married for more than a month." "Then it seems that I'm really ignorant. What I said just now. I was impulsive. Please don't mind, Mrs. Mo." The principal's daughter was sober. She knew that she couldn't get what she wanted, so she quickly accepted the reality and didn't want to offend CEO Mo or Mrs. Mo because of this. Obviously, she wanted to make up for what she said just now. But to be honest, Mo Jingshan's behavior just now was so clear that anyone who still dared to provoke Jin Wan was basically a fool. Mo Jingshan had obviously put Jin Wan in the most important position in his life. Who dared to provoke Jin Wan? She wanted to make things right as soon as possible to relieve the embarrassment. Jin Wan just smiled at her and gently shook her head, indicating that it didn't matter. Then the two women opened the door with a smile and walked back into the private room. After dinner, the school leaders didn't dare to be too rude to Mo Jingshan because they didn't know his preferences, so they didn't dare to suggest going to a KTV or some entertainment club. Seeing that Mo Jingshan came with his wife, they didn't dare to make any suggestions. In the end, they only chatted at the table. Jin Wan occasionally entered a topic, and they all raised their eyes to give her a polite look. The dinner was a happy one. Before leaving, the school leaders, who were drunk, gave Mo Jingshan their best wishes and were about to praise Jin Wan's performance in T University. However, Jin Wan was too low-key and didn't pay much attention to her. After thinking for a long time, they couldn't think of anything and could only say one sentence: Mrs. Mo's academic performance is really good. The corner of Jin Wan's mouth twitched. Chapter 260. It wasn't easy for Mo Jingshan to confess to her, and it was in public. Jin Wan hid this little bit of joy deep in her heart. She drove home, took a shower, changed her clothes, and sat on the sofa in the living room. They were so lovey-dovey that they inevitably kissed. As they kissed, the man felt that this position was not convenient enough. He simply held the woman's waist, lifted her up, and placed her on his lap. His warm thin lips moved from her lips to her chin, cheeks, and behind her ears. Then he moved down her neck from behind her ears. The man's kiss and breath traveled down from her collarbone, kissing her softness that was gradually perking up. His hand also silently reached under her nightgown. His warm palm held onto a soft ball, and his breathing gradually became heavier. Jin Wan was wearing a very ordinary nightgown. It was neither conservative nor sexy. It had to be taken off from the bottom up. Buzz, it was a text message. Jin Wan was pressed against the sofa by the man. Hearing this sound, she suddenly remembered that this was the sofa. Before returning to the bedroom, she was actually stripped clean. She immediately opened her eyes. Mo Jingshan paused for only a second. His low voice had been dyed hoarse by the Passion Valley. Don't mind it. Continue. With that, he held her chin and continued to kiss her. Jin Wan. Why did Boss Missouri like to do it on the sofa recently? My phone is ringing. I heard it. Let me take a look. It's just a text message. So I took a look. I don't usually have junk messages on my phone. Those that can be sent to me are basically people I know. No hurry. Don't mind it for now. Mo Jingshan, the sound of text messages did not stop ringing once. Several messages were sent over with a buzzing sound. Who would keep sending text messages in the middle of the night? Except for Xia Tian, no one else would be so crazy. No, get up. With the sound of the phone by her ear, Jin Wan could not concentrate. Mo Jingshan did not care. Earlier on, when he saw her smiling happily at others, he already wanted to press her down here and teach her a lesson. It wasn't easy for her to come back. How was she going to cooperate today? Why would she care about the person who sent her messages in the middle of the night? Jin Wan could not do anything to him, nor could she push him away. She bit her lip helplessly and said, "Let me take a look first. What if something happens? Can't I continue after reading it? 1 more minute won't make a difference." When she said that, he paused. He narrowed his eyes and said hoarsely, "I'll give you a minute. You'll pay me an hour?" What a beast. Seeing that she didn't speak, he reached out to take off her panties. Fine. An hour it is. Anyway, even if you don't give me a minute, it's still up to you to decide how long we have to do it tonight. After balancing the benefits, she felt that it didn't matter whether she agreed to this request or not. She just had to give in verbally. As expected, Mo Jingshan stopped. Jin Wan hurriedly sat up, grabbed a handful of her messy hair behind her shoulders, and picked up her cell phone to take a look. Mo Jingshan saw the woman sitting on the sofa. Her clothes were almost peeled off. The air in the room was still a little cold. Seeing that she was sitting there looking at her cell phone without wrapping herself with her clothes, Mo Jingshan frowned and patiently waited for her to read the message. He then expressionlessly picked her up from the sofa and carried her back to the bedroom. He kicked the door open, put her on the bed, and lifted the quilt to cover her body that had been contaminated by the air. Sure enough, Jin Wan guessed right. Only Xia Tian dared to send such a bombshell message in the middle of the night. Xia Tian, boss, the performance report and financial list of the studio last month have been sent to your email. Boss G, please check it. Xia Tian, you really have a good eye. In the past 2 months, I didn't have to do anything at all. I just had to deal with the investors who came to negotiate the transfer of land and real estate. And I didn't touch the properties with a high market value under the studio's name. But some of the shops and small places with particularly good geographical locations that you bought sporadically were snatched up by those investors as treasures. Xia Tian, the lowest price they offered was enough for our studio to survive for several years. We made a net profit of more than 40 million yuan. I think the price can be raised further, so I didn't sell it. Anyway, you are not in a hurry to sell it. Xia Tian, by the way, I just wanted to ask you. Chinfeng Company is going to buy the land in Dawang City from us for 350 million yuan. Do you think the price is right? Do you want to sell it? Xia Tian, your small studio is nominally a studio, but in fact, no one can guess that you have so many treasures in your hands. If you sell all the existing properties, your studio's working capital will be more than that of many listed companies. You always say it's a small studio. Well done, you are becoming more and more low-key. You don't show your true colors, do you? Xia Tian, what time is it? You don't even reply to my messages? Are you asleep, or are you rolling around in bed with your dear husband? Tut, tut, a guy who values love over friendship. Xia Tian, but then again, dear boss G, now that your studio is so rich, why are you still complaining about being poor every day? If I really break off my relationship with the Xia family, I may really have to rely on you to support me. Which leg of yours needs a pendant now? Make room for me. I want to hug it. Xia Tian, you have only taken over Han Tianyuan's company for a few months. You only spent 30 million yuan on this studio, didn't you? Yesterday, I checked the finance and projects, only to find that in just a few months, the profits have exceeded 10 times. Sure enough, you were right to insist on the road of real estate from the beginning. Then there was a lot of nagging. After reading it, Jin Wan directly replied, one day, you will see the profits increase by 100 times. In the next few years, it will definitely be a good time for the domestic real estate market to rise sharply. But the tree that stands out in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. It's good to keep a low profile. After all, there are so many real estate tycoons in China. If we are suppressed by these tycoons as soon as we start, we will have a hard time in the future. In less than a minute, Xia Tian replied her with a high five emoji. The two of them had a tacit understanding. Most of the time, as long as Jin Wan said a few words, they would understand each other's plans without saying anything more. When she put down the cell phone, Jin Wan found that Mo Jingshan was not in the bedroom. She grabbed her nightgown and put it on, lifted the quilt, and went into the bathroom. She tied up her home bun hair, turned on the tap, and washed her face with cold water to cool down the crimson color on her face. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a string of light and shallow hickeys left on her neck. Chapter 261. Although the hickey was not too serious, Jin Wan still insisted on not letting Mo Jingshan bite her neck at night. However, this man did the exact opposite. The more she resisted, the harder he kissed. In the end, he bullied her on the bed until she could only moan and beg for mercy. Only then did he stop ravaging her neck. However, the strength of his lower body only increased. In the latter half of the night, Jean discovered that the man by her side was not around. When she woke up, she saw that he was in the living room. He seemed to have just received a call. Seeing that Jean was awake, he placed the phone down and tossed it on the sofa. "Why are you awake? Do you still have a lot of work to do in High City? Actually, you don't have to stay in T City to accompany me. I can return to High City in a month. Won't it disturb your work if you accompany me here? I haven't been idle in T City recently. The working style of the subsidiary company is no different from that of High City. It's just that the working environment is different." Mo Jingshan glanced at her. "It's not that many days. It's rare for me to have enough time to accompany you. Isn't that good?" Having enough time to accompany her meant that he had enough time to sleep with her, tease her, and look at her. "I feel that work is more important right now. After I return to High City, I don't have anywhere else to go. When the time comes, we can accompany each other." Jean felt that if she continued to be slept with by him every day, she really would not have the energy to focus on her studies. Although she was first in the test for the first half of the month, she was really afraid that if this continued, her results for the next half of the month would plummet. After all, as long as this man was by her side, she would not be able to focus on anything else. Her entire mind would be teased by him. "We're husband and wife. We can't not spend time alone. If you're worried that you'll be affected because of me, in the future, I won't enter when you're revising in the study." Mo Jingshan smiled faintly. It was clear that he had seen through her thoughts. "Agreeing to let you study here is already my biggest concession. I'll make time to accompany you. Don't tell me you still want to live apart from me." Jean glared at him with sleepy eyes, speechless. "If you have to keep your distance from me so that you can study in peace." The man had already walked over and led her back to the bedroom. He carried her back to the bed and placed his palm on her heart. His tone was meaningful. "That means you can't control your heart. You can't calm down when you see me. Can you blame me for that?" Jean was it because she had suddenly woken up in the middle of the night, so her mind was still a little muddled? How did he manage to convince her with just a few words? Mo Jingshan saw that she wanted to defend herself but felt that he was right. He held her face with a dark gaze and gave her a lingering kiss. "You don't want to sleep anymore? I let you go early because I heard you begging for mercy. If you don't want to sleep, I don't mind continuing to enjoy myself until I'm satisfied." When the kiss ended, Jean eyes immediately became misty. She tried hard to control her breathing. She couldn't help but press her legs together to prevent his hand from entering her. In Mo Jingshan's eyes, it was as though a fire had been thrown into his already dark eyes. "You did it on purpose?" He bit her lips hoarsely. "Earlier, I realized you weren't here and suddenly woke up. I'm still sleepy." Jean turned her face away and leaned into his embrace. Tonight, he only wanted to do it once before letting her go. However, back then, he had used a lot of force. Even though she had showered and slept, she still felt that her body was extremely sensitive in his embrace. Could it be that in the past, it had been too long? Now that he had let her go this time, she suddenly felt uncomfortable. She had actually become this sensitive after just a few words. Mo Jingshan's dark gaze landed on her face. His dark eyes carried a hint of suppressed laughter as he patted her back. Seeing that Jean was really curled up in his embrace, he did not force her to continue. He rubbed her head, indicating for her to sleep peacefully. 2 days later, Jean received a call from Auntie Qin. Auntie Qin was the Ji family's helper. She had watched Jean and Ji Mengran grow up. Eldest Miss, Director Ji wants to send Second Miss overseas. He has even booked the school and plane tickets. For the past 2 days, he has locked Second Miss up at home and has even sent bodyguards to keep a close eye on her. Second Miss hasn't eaten for 2 to 3 days, but Director Ji still insists on sending her overseas. He won't allow her to stay in Haicheng. He won't allow anyone to plead for her. Your relationship with second miss is the best. Director G usually listens to your suggestions. Hurry and plead for her. Auntie Chin's voice came from the phone. Her heart ached and she was anxious. In the Ji family, perhaps only Auntie Chin did not know what stage Jin Wan and Ji Mingran's relationship had reached. She had personally watched the two children grow up. Right now, they were no longer as close as they were when they were young. The entanglement between them was not something that could be explained with just a few words. Perhaps it would not be bad for Auntie Chin to keep this beautiful relationship in her heart. Jin Wan did not speak clearly. She only said, "I'll call my father to understand the situation." "That's right, Auntie Chin, I have something to ask you." "What is it, eldest miss?" "More than 20 years ago, when my mother married into the Ji family, you were already working for the Ji family, right?" "That's right." "Then before my mother married into the Ji family, did she have frequent interactions with anyone? For example, a man, or someone close to her?" If the other party was not Auntie Chin who had watched her grow up, Jin Wan would not have asked so directly. Auntie Chin was silent for a long time. Jin Wan could sense that she was startled by this question. After a while, she finally answered, "Eldest miss, I don't know about this, nor have I heard of it. When Madam first married into the Ji family, I was also new to the Ji family. There are many things that I'm not clear about, I understand." "Thank you, Auntie Chin." Jin Wan could hear the pause in her tone. She did not ask further and hung up the phone. On the other side, Mo Jingshan, who had heard Jin Wan's voice earlier, calmly asked, "Your father plans to send Ji Mengran overseas?" He doesn't wish to see the sisters fighting against each other. Sending her overseas can be considered as killing two birds with one stone. On one hand, he won't be annoyed by her. On the other hand, he can prevent me from doing anything to Ji Mengran. From a father's perspective, I can understand. After all, if we really count it, Mengran is his blood relative. To be able to do this, he is already very considerate of my feelings. Who says you can't touch her while she's overseas? If you want to touch her, you can do so at any time, Mo Jingshan calmly said. Chapter 262. However, there was no need for Jin Wan to take revenge. 3 days later, High City's aviation administration released a piece of news. Flight BA-168 from High City to London, England, had an air crash over the Pacific Ocean due to an unknown malfunction. 57 Chinese people, 108 British people, and dozens of passengers from other countries had died on the plane. China and England had already deployed maritime rescue teams to search and rescue, but based on the weather conditions and the surrounding environment of the accident, it was estimated that almost no one had survived. After learning of this news, Jin Wan subconsciously called Ji Hongwen. However, there was no answer for a long time. She stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of her apartment in T City, looking toward the Pacific Ocean. The day before yesterday, she had called Auntie Chin again and learned that Ji Mengran had taken off from High City this morning. She was on the plane that crashed, Flight BA-168. Jin Wan did not find it hard to accept the news of a so-called sister who had troubled her in both her previous lives. However, her first reaction was that Ji Hongwen would definitely not be able to take it. Ji Hongwen's call remained unanswered for a long time. Jin Wan decided to call Auntie Chin again. When she picked up the call, Auntie Chin was crying the entire time. She said that Director Ji's condition was not too good. After learning of the plane crash, he had locked himself in his office and had not come out for several hours. No one in the company dared to barge in. Jin Wan would never forgive him no matter what. However, in Ji Hongwen's eyes, Ji Mengran was still his biological daughter. The moment Mo Jingshan entered, he saw that Jin Wan had put on her clothes and was preparing to leave. "It's already 6 in the evening. Where are you going?" "I'm going back to High City tonight." I don't know if I can make it back tomorrow morning. Tomorrow, have Feng Ling help me apply for leave from Professor Lin. Jin Wan anxiously spoke and prepared to leave. Mo Jingshan glanced at her and reached out to hold her wrist, bringing her back. At the same time, he placed her bag down. Right now, even if you rush to the airport, the earliest flight back to High City will be after midnight. There's no use going to the airport now. Calm down first. Tell me, why are you going back? Mengran went to London today. Something happened to her flight. I'm afraid my dad won't be able to take it. I have to go back to see him. Jin Wan did not believe that Mo Jingshan did not know about such a big piece of news. News of a plane crash would usually be reported immediately in the country. There was indeed a plane crash on the flight from High City to London. After receiving the news in the afternoon, I sent someone to check with the airline company. Ji Mengran didn't board the plane. She was only temporarily included in the missing list. Mo Jingshan stared at Jin Wan's slightly pale face and said lightly. Jin Wan looked at him, opened her mouth, and finally calmed down. She didn't speak at first, as if to make sure he was telling the truth. Then she picked up her cell phone and called Ji Hongwen, but he still didn't answer. But my dad isn't answering his phone now, and the people from his company don't dare to enter his office to look for him. I'm worried. Director Ji has been through many trials and tribulations in the business world. His mental fortitude won't be so weak. I'll send Shenmu to Ji Corporation to take a look and have him inform Director Ji that Ji Mengran didn't board the plane. Mo Jingshan pressed her arm. Don't panic. Leave it to me. That's right, Shenmu did not follow Mo Jingshan to T-City. Shenmu was still in High City. As Mo Jingshan's most capable assistant, he would definitely have a way to enter the Ji Corporation to meet her father. Jin Wan nodded, turning her gaze toward Mo Jingshan. Mo Jingshan knew that she was a little anxious and did not say much. He only patted the back of her hand comfortingly and picked up his phone to call Shenmu. After personally hearing Mo Jingshan's instructions, Jin Wan glanced at her cell phone. Another piece of news about a body being retrieved by a search and rescue boat appeared on the screen. Perhaps it was because she had already lost all feelings. The many years of vicissitudes in her previous life and the hatred she felt today had covered up the so-called feelings they had for each other for the past 10 years. From the moment she first heard about Ji Mengran's plane crash until now, Jin Wan's heart had not been moved at all. She was only slightly dissatisfied that she could not personally let Ji Mengran experience the path she had taken in her previous life. She also felt a little disappointed. Even now, when she learned that Ji Mengran might not have been on the plane, she did not feel anything. Things like feelings, if they no longer existed, would never exist. Things that had cooled, things that had been chilled, could never be warmed up again. Jin Wan was carried back to the sofa by Mo Jingshan. She had been staring at her cell phone, wondering when Ji Hongwen would call back. Mo Jingshan took off the coat she had put on earlier and placed it by the side. He pressed her down on the sofa and leaned over to look at her. Are you sad that Director Ji didn't answer your call? Jin Wan did not move. Mo Jingshan did not ask her more. He sat down by her side and pressed her head against his shoulder. Jin Wan closed her eyes and was quiet for a long time before saying, regardless of whether something really happened to Mengran or not, I feel that after this incident, my father will instinctively start to avoid me. Mo Jingshan's hand paused on her head. He caressed it and lowered his head to kiss her forehead. Nuan Nuan. His voice was low and carried a hint of pity and understanding. Regarding the relationship between you two daughters, he did not handle it very well, and because he was too busy, he neglected to discipline Ji Mengran. But you can't think that he will gradually drift away from you just because you know that there may not be a real blood relationship between you and him. Maybe I'm thinking too much, Mo Jingshan's warm voice rang in her ear. Since you were very young, you have been the pride in his eyes and the daughter he has focused on cultivating, which proves that he has never considered the issue of blood relationship. It's enough for him to think that you are his daughter. After what happened today, he needs a quiet environment to calm down for the time being. He is not avoiding you. In this world, all kinds of accidents can happen at any time. Only long-term and sincere love will not disappear. I treat you like this, and so does Director G. Jean-Wan buried her face in his arms. I hope that I will always be his daughter. Even if one day the G family is no longer as prosperous as before, I am willing to be his daughter. The man was silent for a few seconds before he said in a low and indifferent voice, if Director G knew what you think, he would be very pleased. He has not let you down for the past 20 years. This is the best reward you can give him. It is much more practical than calling to ask about your concern. She hugged him and buried her face deeper into his neck. The little woman was no longer as stubborn as she had been a few months ago. At least when she was occasionally vulnerable, she would get used to hiding in his arms. This kind of trust was enough to comfort Mo Jingshan. Chapter 263. Jean-Wan wrapped her arms tightly around Mo Jingshan's neck, softly saying, life is truly too unpredictable. It's so unpredictable that if you don't grab hold of something today, you'll completely miss it and lose it tomorrow. The man pinched her face. At least you won't lose me. Jean-Wan did not speak. There were many unexpected laws in this world. She was afraid of those laws that were always contrary to one's thinking, and always went against everything one hoped for in one's heart. It was not that Mo Jingshan could not tell that after Jean-Wan learned about her parentage, although she appeared calm and unaffected, there were still some things in her heart that she could not get over. Trust me. No matter how unpredictable life is, I'll always be here. Jean-Wan nodded, burying her face deeper into his neck. Mo Jingshan directly lowered his head, returning a deep kiss. T University. During class, Jean-Wan went to the bathroom. Mo Jingshan had been in T City for more than half a month, and most of his work had entered the final stages. In a day or two, he would be returning to High City. Although Jean-Wan was reluctant to part with him, there was not much time left before she returned to High City. She could not really delay his work. After all, for her sake, Mo Jingshan had already increased the workload in T City to the maximum. He had also extended the time limit as much as possible. It was precisely because they were about to separate again that Jean-Wan was almost squeezed dry by Mo Jingshan for the past 2 nights. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were entangled to death. Ling Feifei followed him into the bathroom. Seeing that Jean-Wan was there, she approached and symbolically washed her hands. She squeezed some hand sanitizer on and turned to look at the light blue turtleneck Jean-Wan was wearing. She revealed a harmless smile. Jean-Wan, don't tell me you and Feng Ling really know each other? Previously, when you were in the dormitory, your relationship had always been mysterious. Recently, I haven't seen Feng Ling, and you haven't returned to the dormitory for more than half a month. Bai Wei and I have been missing the two of you. Jean-Wan glanced at her, raised her hand under the dryer, and unhurriedly blew on it. As she blew, she said lightly, it's not surprising that you suspect the relationship between me and Feng Ling, but if you say you miss us, forget it. If we're not here, won't you have a place to put your luggage? How would I dare to put it there? Don't mention luggage, even if I toss a piece of clothing onto your bed, Bai Wei won't be able to resist reprimanding me. She'll insist that the two of you haven't returned to the dormitory recently and that the bed is still yours. Although you and Feng Ling aren't in this dormitory, there's still Bai Wei watching over it. Ling Feifei rubbed her hands as she spoke. She then deliberately glanced at Jean-Wan's clothes. T City isn't as cold as High City. Why are you wearing a turtleneck here? Aren't you hot? Jean-Wan's eyelids lifted, her lips revealing a hint of mockery. What are you trying to find out from me again? Towards a small character like Ling Feifei, she did not wish to waste any time beating around the bush. Soon, they would be going their separate ways. Why did this Ling Feifei look down on her so much? When they were living together, she found fault with her. Now that they were living together, she still wanted to find fault with her. Jean Wan did not know which thorn in her had pricked her. If she did not touch her, it would itch. Ling Feifei looked at Jean Wan's usual indifferent expression, her delicate, fair face remaining indifferent. After washing her hands, Ling Feifei pulled out a piece of tissue. As she wiped her hands, she said, "Earlier in the classroom, I saw a red thing around your neck. I didn't get a good look at it before it was covered by your collar. Don't tell me you were injured while you were living outside the school. Let me take a look. Is the injury serious?" As she spoke, Ling Feifei suddenly raised her hand to tug at Jean Wan's collar. Jean Wan was expressionless as she raised her hand to block it. At the same time, she curved her lips lazily and coldly. She smiled ambiguously. "When did you become so concerned about me? You could even notice such a small mark on my neck, and you even followed me to the bathroom to take a look." After hearing her words, Ling Feifei's lips curved in an unfriendly manner. "Jean Wan, as expected, you have a guilty conscience." Jean Wan shook off her hand, casually tidied up her clothes, and turned to walk out. Ling Feifei could not hold back her anger and directly followed her. Jean Wan heard her footsteps but ignored them. As she walked, she slowly patted away the non-existent dust on her body. "Even if you hid well, you were still discovered. Didn't you just find an opportunity to hug CEO Mo's thigh? Why, do you feel good fooling around with CEO Mo behind his wife's back?" Ling Feifei spoke with a sour tone as she leaned close to Jean Wan's ear. "These days, have you been with CEO Mo? Has he really taken a liking to you?" When she heard this sentence, Jean Wan's footsteps paused. She turned to look at Ling Feifei, who appeared as though she had caught onto someone's weakness. Jean Wan only glanced at her before sneering in disdain. A few seconds later, she continued walking toward the professor. When she was about to reach the classroom door, Jean Wan slowly and indifferently said, "There really aren't many people like you who only believe in your own foolish heart and refuse to believe in your own eyes." Ling Feifei leaped in front of Jean Wan and stared at her. She raised her voice slightly and said agitatedly, "You really are a hypocrite. That day in the stadium, if not for me, would you have had the opportunity to be so close to CEO Mo? Right now, I'm asking you from the perspective of a participant, did you go behind my back to seduce CEO Mo? You still have the cheek to speak so confidently?" Seeing Ling Feifei's agitated expression, Jean Wan raised her eyes and coldly watched her. "What did you participate in? That day in the stadium, you didn't even have the cheek to take the initiative to speak to CEO Mo. If I hadn't told you that you're from High City, you most likely wouldn't have had the chance to speak to him in this lifetime." Ling Feifei glared at her. "At the very least, I was the one who pulled the strings. Is this how you treat me?" Jean Wan did her best to retract her gaze as though she was looking at an idiot. She calmly watched her. "So, if I had really slept with him these days, what would you have done?" Ling Feifei widened her eyes. Her expression was one of disbelief. Hearing and guessing were one thing, but she did not expect Jean Wan to openly admit it. Jean Wan no longer looked at her and entered the classroom. After sitting down, she kept the books on the table. Ling Feifei followed in and stood by her side. She lowered her voice and warned, "Jean Wan, CEO Mo is already married. You're a third party. Don't you have any shame?" Chapter 264. The moment her true thoughts were exposed, she was slightly embarrassed. Ling Feifei saw Jean Wan's unafraid expression and could only conclude the following points. Pleased, arrogant, and smug, as though she had someone supporting her from behind. Right now, who else could be supporting Jean Wan? Wasn't it Mo Jingshan? Jean Wan did not look at Ling Feifei's expression. She picked up the thermos flask on the table and opened the lid. Through the steam rising from the flask, she quietly watched Professor Lin, who had walked in due to the bell ringing. Ling Feifei finally returned to her seat. However, her gaze occasionally shifted to Jean Wan's high-collared shirt. Even if Jean Wan's shirt was very high, under her careful observation, she could still see the vague kiss marks that would occasionally appear when Jean Wan turned her head. CEOMO appeared to be cold, low profile, and not particularly approachable. Would he be so intense? At night, Jean Wan did not agree to go shopping with Bai Wei. After class, she left T University and saw that Feng Ling had parked the car outside. It had been a few days since she saw Feng Ling, but it was as though nothing had happened. Her hair had been cut a little shorter, and she was still dressed in black. She stood by the car in an agile manner. Jean Wan said that she wanted to go to the mall to buy some things. Feng Ling accompanied her and did not say a single word. It was as though she had returned to the state she was in when she first arrived by Jean Wan's side. Since Feng Ling was avoiding the topic, Jean Wan would not purposely tear open her wound and ask about it. She did not say much and only occasionally asked if the things she bought were nice and waited for Feng Ling's evaluation. She did not mention anything else. At 6:00, Feng Ling sent Jean Wan to the restaurant below Mo Jingshan's branch company. When she arrived, Mo Jingshan was already sitting there. From the looks of it, he had been waiting for a long time. She did not know if he had heard or sensed her movements, but before she walked over, he had already looked over. Their eyes met. Jean Wan saw that the man's ink-black eyes seemed to be brimming with smiles. He then stood up. She walked over, and he happened to pull out a chair for her. He then placed her coat and bag by the side. His low voice was filled with a doting smile. "Didn't I ask you to come over at 5:30? Why are you so late?" Feng Ling has rested for a while. It seems like her work efficiency needs to be improved after returning to work. Jean Wan raised her head to look at the man's handsome chin. "Earlier, I went shopping with Feng Ling. I saw a few nice clothes and tried them on. The new clothes are in the car. I didn't buy it. After trying a few, I felt that the style was not much different from what I usually wear, so I didn't buy it." Jean Wan calmly sat down and received the menu from the waiter. She glanced through it and said, "You've been in T-City for so many days, and you've been cooking at home almost every day. It's fine to occasionally eat from restaurants outside, but I still prefer the food you make." After ordering, Jean Wan took a sip of her hot drink. When she saw the man sit down, her clear and indifferent voice rang, "Someone is following you." "How did you know?" Jean Wan did not immediately turn her head to look out. She had sensed it the moment they left T University and could easily guess who was following them. She decided to ignore it and only drove here after strolling with Feng Ling. However, the other party was still following them. Such a low-end method of following. The car is parked right behind Feng Ling's car. "Who is it?" Mo Jingshan asked mildly. Jean Wan placed her cup down, pursing her lips slightly. "It should be Ling Feifei. She suspects that I'm seducing a married man like you. She's probably trying to take some evidence to threaten me." "Oh, right. She might even be able to extort some conditions from you that you normally wouldn't agree to." Mo Jingshan found it funny to see her impatient expression. School and work are on two completely different levels of intelligence. You sure can endure it. What else can I do? You were right last time. Being too serious with this kind of child will only lower my intelligence. Jean Wan watched the man's smiling eyes and pursed her lips. "I just need to persevere for 2 more weeks. After the T University anniversary in the final test, I can return to High City's embrace." Mo Jingshan raised his brows. "You plan on attending the anniversary?" "I didn't attend it when I was still a student. Since I've encountered it this time, I might as well participate. Earlier, I was preparing to buy clothes for the anniversary. I didn't want to be too high profile or too casual. After searching for a long time, I couldn't find anything suitable." The man watched her, smiling mildly. "I'll return to High City tomorrow night. Tonight, I'll accompany you to shop for clothes." "No need, there's no rush. When the time comes, just pick one from my wardrobe." From the corner of her eyes, Jean Wan saw that Ling Feifei's car was still parked outside. The car window was rolled down slightly. She was most likely secretly taking photos. She did not turn back to look. She only held on to the cup of hot drink, asking, "How's my dad?" The day before yesterday, after Ji Hongwen met with Shenmu, he did call Jean Wan. However, he only said a few simple words of concern and did not speak further. Right now, it was still uncertain if Ji Mengran had gone missing or met with a mishap. If she had not met with a mishap, why was there still no news of her? However, Mo Jingshan had found out that Ji Mengran did not board the plane. It was impossible for someone to disappear just like that, much less coincidentally during a plane crash. Under such circumstances, it was not appropriate for Jean Wan to call back frequently to ask about it. After all, even if Jean Wan was not the mastermind behind Ji Mengran's departure, she was still the main reason behind it. He's still waiting for news. His emotions are more stable than you think. There's no need to worry. My dad is someone who is very good at controlling and hiding his emotions. If not for that, I wouldn't have only found out about my identity from someone else's mouth at such an old age. At this moment, the waiter placed a bowl of borscht on the table. Mo Jingshan scooped some soup and placed it in front of Jean Wan. His deep eyes carried a hint of gentleness. Don't get to the bottom of everything. It's most important to stabilize your own state of mind. Jean Wan looked at his handsome face and glanced out of the corner of her eyes. If that crazy girl outside uses the photos she secretly took today to threaten you, a married man, or to threaten me, what do you think I should do when such a senseless situation happens? Jean Wan did not plan on letting Ji Hongwen's matter affect the mood of this meal. She took the initiative and decisively changed the topic. The man smiled. His long arm reached over to touch her head. He chuckled softly. Will you make her regret looking down on you for the past 3 months, or will you use the title of the real Mrs. Mo to slap her face? Jean Wan took a sip of the soup and calmly said, that will depend on how much she seeks death. Chapter 265. Mo Jingshan raised his brows slightly, speaking in a low and heavy voice. After returning to High City, it won't be as relaxing as it is in T City. Since you're still here, cherish your last month of school life and spend some time with your friends. Don't be too hard on yourself. Hearing his words, Jean Wan suddenly felt that her delicate nose was about to turn sour. Previously, Mo Jingshan had said that when he left, he couldn't wake her up. Otherwise, would he have to watch as she hugged him and cried? At most, they wouldn't be apart for more than a month. Right now, Jean Wan was beginning to feel reluctant to part with him. When they returned, Feng Ling did not follow them. As Jean Wan fastened her seatbelt, she glanced out of the car window. She saw that when Feng Ling hailed a taxi and left, her figure was still lean and nimble. Perhaps she was thinking too much. For someone like Feng Ling, who had fought her way through a group of men, perhaps her heart was more tenacious than most women. Or perhaps, Feng Ling was better at hiding her feelings than most women, completely sealing away the emotions she shouldn't have in a corner of her heart. A shadow pressed down on her. By the time she reacted, Mo Jingshan had already helped her buckle her seatbelt. The black SUV stopped in front of a custom-made gown shop in T City. This shop was several times more high-end than the one she had seen with Ling Feifei and the others. Since you've decided to attend T University's 100-year anniversary celebration, don't be too perfunctory. This is a branch opened by a French designer friend of mine. Many of the gowns here are very suitable for you. Go in and take a look. If there's anything suitable, buy it. The gowns here are all measured and tried on before being airlifted to your size. If there's anything you're not satisfied with, you can send it back to Paris to have it changed. Jean Wan originally did not plan on wearing a gown, but since Mo Jingshan had already spoken, she thought for a moment and nodded. Mo Jingshan alighted from the car and opened the door for her. He held her hand as they entered. The employees immediately came out to welcome them. When they saw Mo Jingshan, it was as though they had seen a live face scanner. Without calling their boss or confirming his identity, they had already recognized him and greeted him with a face full of smiles. Mr. Mo, there weren't many people in the shop, and it was relatively quiet. There were only a few young couples trying on their dresses, and they caught everyone's attention as soon as they entered. Jean Wan's hand was held by the man's warm hand. He didn't look at anyone's eyes, ignored their envious eyes, and took her to see all kinds of dresses inside. Simple, complicated, classical, modern, low-key, and luxurious. The crystal display windows had everything they wanted. Jean Wan's gaze finally fell on the innermost strapless gown embellished with gold. This gown seemed to be a new design for the Paris Autumn Fashion Show. This year, it was fashionable to have such a shiny but not too luxurious gold gown. Jean Wan was very satisfied with the design and color of the gown. The skirt was spread wide, almost in the shape of an A. The layers of soft chiffon were decorated with tiny stars. It was a little mischievous and romantic. Overall, it was very beautiful and suited Jean Wan. Seeing that she liked it, the shop assistant on the side smiled and said, "Is this it? We'll bring it out for you to try on immediately." Jean Wan neither nodded nor shook her head. Indeed, she liked it. However, she felt that if Mo Jingshan wasn't in T-City for the few days she was dressed like this at the school anniversary party, wouldn't she appear too gorgeous and lonely without anyone by her side? "You don't like it?" Seeing the trace of hesitation in her eyes, Mo Jingshan stood by her side, his breath enveloping her nose. "I didn't even know that T-City had such a good gown shop. I've never seen it before." Jean Wan raised her eyes. Mo Jingshan watched her. "Do you like it or not?" "I like it, but isn't it too beautiful? Those classmates of yours are either young and ignorant, or they're arrogant and overbearing. For the school anniversary, they'll only wear more beautiful clothes. This is already considered very low-key." Mo Jingshan's expression was serious as he spoke, but Jean Wan could see from his eyes that he seemed to be very satisfied with this gown. The shop assistant had already carefully brought out the gown, smiling as she invited Jean Wan in to try it on. Jean Wan nodded and entered the inner room. There were many mirrors in the changing room. After the shop assistant helped her put it on, she sighed in admiration by the side. Jean Wan lifted her long hair and looked at herself in the mirror. It seemed like she had not specially dressed up for a long time. Even when attending banquets, she did not put in any effort to dress up. Right now, her mood was no longer that of a 21-year-old. She was always muddling through many things, and she had almost forgotten about her beauty and the stunning appearances she had at various banquets when she was a teenager. The lighting in the changing room was very gentle. She touched her hair and looked at herself. Right now, her fair and clean face was slightly more dignified than before. It was as though this was the reason why she was known as Hai Cheng's #1 socialite. The top half of the gown was strapless, perfectly displaying her exquisite collarbones. Slightly lower, the soft, white skin was faintly discernible. It was not revealing, but it gave off a comfortable and seductive feeling. The woman's slender curves were perfectly displayed. This gown was very well fitted. There was no need for any alterations. Jean Wan looked at herself in the mirror. It seemed like she was this beautiful when she got married. It was just that back then, she did not pay much attention to appreciate it. She walked out of the changing room. It turned out that Mo Jingshan was sitting on the sofa outside, waiting for her to come out. He was flipping through a magazine in his hands, sitting there elegantly and quietly. When he heard her voice, he turned back. The first thing that flashed past the man's eyes was warmth. He was not as breathtaking as the other male customers who were choosing gowns for their female companions. Mo Jingshan understood how beautiful Jean Wan was. Thus, breathtaking was no longer suitable for him. It was just that every time he saw her more beautiful, he wanted to hide this little woman away to prevent others from thinking too much about her. Regardless of appearance or temperament, Jean Wan was like a dignified and romantic princess. Right now, it was rare for her to specially dress up. She did not have as many flashy thoughts. Instead, she was more gentle and reserved, making her look even more beautiful. Does it look good? Facing Immerse, Jean Wan was still slightly nervous. It looks good. Very good. The man was still not stingy with his praise. Jean Wan immediately smiled. Then I'll take this one. I won't go try on other styles. I'll just wear it with a pair of shoes of the same color for the school anniversary. The shop assistant by the side continued to praise it. Jean Wan told the shop assistant that she wanted this one. She then said to Immerse, I'll go back to the changing room to change. Chapter 266. Jean Wan was startled and subconsciously stepped back. However, this movement was caught by the man's eyes. He held her waist with one hand, and under the envious and heckling gazes of the shop assistants, he brought her into the fitting room. The door was closed by the man, and then a familiar scent pressed against her. Jean Wan reflexively stepped back. By the time she reacted, the man's tall body had pressed her against the door of the fitting room behind her. Although there was a lot of space here, there was only him and her. Jean Wan's face strangely heated up. She looked around, wondering if there were any surveillance cameras in the fitting room. Why did you come in? I want to change out of the gown first. The man's fingers moved through her long hair. He looked at her black and white eyes and kissed her lips. Jean Wan? You're so beautiful. I want to kiss you first, the man said hoarsely against her lips. Jean Wan, he drove home and entered the door. The lights in the living room were not turned on in time. Immerse held her face with one hand, lowered his head, and kissed her lips harshly, continuing what he had been restraining himself in the fitting room. After kissing for a while, Jean Wan put her hand against his chest and breathed through the gap between their lips. However, in the next second, her face was forced by the man again. He kissed the corner of her lips, and his ink-like eyes were filled with endless darkness, almost swallowing her up. Still hiding? Jean Wan blinked. Why do I feel that you're especially eager today because you're returning to High City tomorrow night, as if you're going straight to the battlefield? In the past, no matter what, Immerse had always been exceptionally patient with her. Each time, when the conditions were right, success would come naturally. But now, after changing out of the gown, she was forced out of that shop, forced into the car, and then directly pressed against the wall after returning. Immerse lowered his eyes to look at her and said indifferently, You're right. I'm indeed planning to go straight to the battlefield and return to High City tomorrow night. Can't I devour you clean tonight? Jean Wan. Then isn't this too cruel? Treating me to dinner tonight, bringing me to buy a gown, and now that we're home, you're so direct. I'm almost suspecting that I'm not your wife, but a little mistress whom you rarely get to have fun with. The man chuckled hoarsely, but ignored her words. He reached his hand under her waist, pulled down the zipper of her skirt, and quickly peeled off her skirt. Jean Wan rushed to hold his hand. She blushed in fright at the way he was going to do it without any foreplay. Immerse. He lowered his head and kissed her cheek, chuckling hoarsely. Just now in the fitting room, you obviously couldn't control yourself. Now that we're home, do you still need me to tease you again? Wasn't it already prepared? This man. Jean Wan felt as though something was about to explode in her head. She blushed and whispered, Immerse, shut up. I was in a hurry to change. I didn't. Before she could finish speaking, her skirt had already been peeled off. The man raised his hand, and the skirt was tossed out, landing on the carpet near the sofa. He then pressed her into his embrace, pressing his lower body tightly against hers. She could clearly feel that right now, he was indeed in a state where he needed to rush to the battlefield. Jean Wan. In the past, why did she feel that this man had a pure heart and few desires? His abstinence was most likely a facade for outsiders to see. The man's hand came to peel off her top again. Jean Wan rushed to grab his hand tightly. Mo Jingshan narrowed his eyes, his hoarse voice softly coaxing by her ear. Let go, En. Jean Wan raised her eyes to look at his handsome face. She looked at his seductive, ink-colored gaze. His eyes were focused and filled with a rare urgency. All of a sudden, Jean Wan's heart was filled with an indescribable sense of accomplishment. For someone like him to be unable to control himself, aside from their mutual habits and desire for each other's bodies, it was also because he had once said that he loved her very much. His feelings for her were so deep that even the words Mrs. M.O. were insufficient to express it. He belonged only to her. The moment this thought entered her mind, Jean Wan suddenly stood on her tiptoes to take the initiative to kiss him. In an instant, the man who originally wanted to peel off her clothes gave up on this momentary tug. Without any hesitation, he carried her up. As Jean Wan softly cried out, he bent down to seal her lips and rushed into the bedroom, pressing her onto the large, soft bed. His soft kisses moved to the back of her ear. His low, husky voice pounded against her eardrums. You probably don't know how much self-control I had to use in the fitting room to not tear off your gown and harshly fuck you there. Jean Wan did not know how beautiful she was when she wore that gown to the point where the man could not control himself. However, for some reason, she had a very accurate intuition that tonight, she would most likely die under his body. Even if she did not die, she would at least be half dead. To Mo Jingshan, the short separation that was about to come could be as short as a week or as long as a month. Each of these factors determined that tonight, Jean Wan would be tormented by him until late into the night. And with this man's stamina, every time he did not intend to let her off easily, he would make her cry until her voice went hoarse. However, every time she cried out hoarsely, she would be met with a new round of ruthless bullying. In the end, she could only turn her sweaty face away and weakly bite the corner of the blanket that she had just pulled up. She held back the undisciplined sounds in her mouth, afraid that she would provoke him again and again. If that happened, this night would truly be endless. Late at night, Jean Wan was completely exhausted. She did not even have the strength to raise her arms. The man carried her to the bathroom to wash up and helped her put on a comfortable nightgown. He slept by her side and held her to sleep. Jean Wan lay in his embrace. She was so tired that she could not even open her eyes. However, her fingertips could not help but clutch onto his arm, refusing to let go. She opened her eyes slightly and stared at the face that she could not be more familiar with. The man's lips were just the right thickness, and the bridge of his nose was high. His eyebrows were too thick, and if they were too light, they would be too light. Especially this man's eyelashes, which were thicker and longer than most women's. His handsome face had a lazy aura because of the earlier strenuous exercise, and his body emitted the same scent of shower gel as hers. Sensing her gaze, Mo Jingshan gently rubbed her head. He knew that she was very tired but could not bear to sleep. After all, although he would only be returning to High City tomorrow night, she still had classes tomorrow. This meant that they would have to separate early in the morning. Jean Wan could not take it anymore after being rubbed by him. She closed her eyes. Chapter 267. Mo Jingshan had too many business matters to attend to today. Before he left, he naturally woke up early. When he opened his eyes, he saw a fair and clean face leaning against his chest. The little woman's eyes were closed, and her seaweed-like hair was spread across the pillow. She appeared drowsy and beautiful. She slept deeply and was completely defenseless. The man propped himself up on his elbow and looked at her for a while. Suddenly, he leaned over and kissed her. It wasn't the usual morning kiss. Instead, he directly and fiercely snatched her lips and her breath in a way that would wake her up. Jean Wan was startled and immediately opened her eyes. She had slept in his arms since last night and had finally fallen into a deep sleep. Yet, she was suddenly woken up by the man. She opened her eyes in a daze, unsure of what had happened. When the drowsiness in her eyes faded, she met the man's smiling black eyes and heard his low and heavy voice say unhurriedly, I'm going to work. I'll leave tonight. I won't be going to T University to see you, En. Realizing that he had deliberately woken her up, Jean Wan knitted her brows in exhaustion and soreness. She did not want to hear him say that he was leaving. She appeared angry as she said angrily, "Are you going to let me sleep? Last night, you didn't let me sleep well. When I finally managed to sleep soundly, I was woken up by your kiss. So annoying. Hurry back to High City and let me sleep alone. I don't want to sleep with you anymore." Mo Jingshan originally wanted to bully her when he saw her angry expression. However, when he heard her last sentence, his deep, black eyes narrowed dangerously. "Say what you just said again." It was fine that he woke her up, but now he was being fierce to her. Jean Wan pushed him angrily. "I don't want to sleep with you anymore. I won't sleep with you anymore." The man lowered his eyes to stare at her. His thin lips were tinged with a faint but dangerous smile. His early morning voice was especially low. "You won't sleep with me anymore?" His tone was clearly threatening. "I won't, you." Before she could finish her words, she was kissed by the man. Following that, the man pressed his body against hers. He forcefully turned her face and kissed her fiercely. He also took the opportunity to hold her hands, which were about to push him away, and pressed them against the top of her head. Jean Wan was kissed until she could barely breathe before she hurriedly opened her eyes. She whimpered but was unable to speak. In the end, the man bit the corner of her lips, and as soon as she could, she rushed to say, "Mo Jing, you." The man directly sealed her lips again. After ravaging her for a while, he licked her rosy lips that had been kissed since early in the morning. He looked down at the sleepy and helpless woman under him from above. His lips curved slightly. "Are you sure you don't want to sleep with me? You won't come with me after returning to C City?" Earlier, Jean Wan had said those words out of anger. Why didn't she realize that this man had such a nasty side to him? What he meant was that she didn't need to sleep anymore. Tossing and turning in the middle of the night was still not enough? Was he not afraid of kidney deficiency? Jean Wan was actually not afraid of death. She wanted to say that she wouldn't follow him, even if they returned to High City. If she had the guts, she would stay here until her flight was delayed and not return to High City. However, before the words could reach her lips, the man seemed to have no intention of letting go of such an opportunity. The moment her hands regained their freedom, he bit down on her fingertips. His burning palms landed on her sore and weak waist as he murmured softly against her lips, "After we return, if you dare to stop me from sleeping, even if I have to tie you up, I'll tie you to my bed." Jean Wan weakly said, "Are you going to squeeze out every last bit of energy from me today?" The man chuckled softly. He kissed her, but his hands did not stop moving. She harumphed slightly, her brows furrowing. She spread her legs as far apart as possible, allowing him to leave a mark on her body before returning to High City. Early in the morning light quietly peeked in through the gaps of the curtains. In the quiet condominium, only Jean Wan's soft pleading and low panting could be heard, as well as her sobbing cries. In the end, Jean Wan finally laid completely motionless on the bed. She was truly exhausted. She opened her eyes slightly, watching the man for a few seconds in a daze. In the end, she struggled to pull her hands out of his grasp. In the end, she bit her lips and said, "If you continue to be so unrestrained in the future, I really won't sleep with you anymore." The man's lips curved slightly. He pinched her face pitifully and did not continue kissing her. He only gently kissed her lips. "Be good, continue sleeping." After saying this, he got up from her body and covered her with the blanket again. In the end, when the man finally got off the bed, his hand was held by the person on the bed. He turned around, lowering his head to look at her. The sunlight that sneaked in through the gaps of the curtains landed on the man's body. It was as though the tall man was framed with a layer of gold. He was as handsome as a god. "After returning to High City, remember to call me every day when you're not busy. Otherwise, I won't know when you're busy or when you're in a meeting. I won't even be able to call you." Mo Jingshan looked at her delicate and charming appearance. His thin lips curved up, tainted with a doting taste. I understand. He couldn't help but reach out to pinch her face again. He then got up and closed the gap between the curtains, blocking the ray of sunlight so as not to disturb her sleep. The result of being completely exhausted was that by the time Jin Wan finally got up, it was already noon. Mo Jingshan had kept breakfast warm in the kitchen before he left. She could eat it immediately after waking up. After washing up, Jin Wan took out breakfast and sat by the dining table. As she ate, she felt that her legs were trembling uncontrollably. Why did she court death and provoke him this morning? She clearly knew that when he returned to High City today, he would definitely find a way to eat her up inside and out. In the end, this morning, she simply walked right into his trap. Originally, Mo Jingshan was deliberately seducing her, but in the end, she really gave him a chance. After Jin Wan finished eating, she straightened up and brought the utensils back to the kitchen. She had just turned on the dishwasher when she suddenly heard the phone on the dining table ring. She rushed to wash her hands, wiped the water off, and walked out. She picked up the phone and saw that it was Feng Ling calling. She immediately pressed the button to answer. Chapter 268. Half an hour later, Jin Wan went downstairs. Feng Ling was already waiting for her. Mrs. Mo, Feng Ling stood before her. Mr. Mo is going back today? All right, then I'll continue accompanying you to T University today. Is the wound on your arm all healed? It's already healed. It's fine. If I still have any problems, CEO Mo wouldn't let me continue following you. On the way back to T University, Jin Wan casually said, I noticed that you've cut your hair short again. Previously, it looked quite nice when you grew it out. Now that you've suddenly cut it so short, those who don't know might think that the person by my side is not a female bodyguard but a handsome, fair-skinned man. Isn't this exactly what CEO Mo wants? He wants others to think that you have a handsome man by your side, and no one will dare to provoke you. Feng Ling chuckled. It's fine if you didn't mention it. Now that you mention it, I finally realize that he arranged for you to stay by my side. Perhaps this was his intention all along. Jin Wan pursed her lips. Otherwise, why do you think Mr. Mo would let me follow you all the way to T-City? Feng Ling raised her brows slightly. This man, Mo Jingshan, was really scheming and far-sighted. At night, Jin Wan returned to the condo from T University. This was the first night Mo Jingshan had returned to High City. After spending more than half a month with him, she suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. The kitchen was empty. There was no sign of Boss Missouri, who would come back on time every day to personally prepare dinner for her. There was no sign of him on the sofa, who was used to hugging her, and there was no sign of him on the bed. Only the razor left by the man in the bathroom was placed neatly in the cabinet, as though waiting for its owner to return at any time. It was only the first night, and she was already missing Mo Jingshan. How could this be? However, less than 2 days later, Jin Wan was blocked by Xing Yihan's car at the entrance of T University. When Xing Yihan's car appeared, Feng Ling pulled Jin Wan back a little and stared coldly at the man's face through the car window. Why are you treating me like an outsider? In the car, Xing Yihan glanced at the two of them and finally rested his eyes on Jin Wan's indifferent face. The bodyguard CEO Mo arranged for you is very loyal. Jin Wan looked at him expressionlessly. Is the Xing family so free now? Why did he have to come to T-City to be an eyesore? Didn't you take Ji Mengren away a while ago? Now that she's missing, you can't even pretend to sympathize and care for her. What are you doing here? Hearing her obvious ridicule, Xing Yihan said coldly and indifferently, Jin Wan. Jin Wan frowned at his voice. Please call me Miss Ji or Mrs. Mo. I'm not familiar with you. The man said coldly, since you can't let go of what happened many years ago, I won't force you to let go. I just want to ask you, was it your request or Mo Jingshan's unilateral check that the Xing Group's Hong Kong shares were suddenly suppressed by the Mo Corporation? Jean Wan listened and looked at her. Her tone was normal and natural. Do I still need to tell you the answer? Do you think Mo Jingshan has the time to pay attention to a company like the Xing Corporation? Of course it's because I don't like you. Xing Yihan smiled coldly and mockingly. Mo Jingshan has been suppressing the Xing Group for a long time. Did you think he would wait for your instructions before taking action against me? It's just that he's been poking his nose into the stock market recently. I think so too. Without you in the middle, he wouldn't have spent so much effort to control the lifeline of Xing Holdings step by step. Jean Wan gently pushed Feng Ling's figure away and was quiet for a moment before saying, since you already know, why are you still asking? There's no difference between what he did and what I wanted him to do. Jean Wan. When he said these two words, his tone was sharp. Do you plan to speak to me with this attitude forever? Of course. Who do you think you are, Mr. Xing? Do I need to be polite to you? A person who once played such a role in my life, and you expect me to act like a saint and say I forgive you? I should have made my attitude clear from the beginning. My position has always been clear. Xing Yihan suddenly smiled in the car. His smile was faint, but there was a hint of coldness hidden in the corner of his lips. He eventually hid it away. There was a smile on Jean Wan's face, although there was no smile in her eyes. Do you want me to make it clearer? I was indeed young back then, but I know you weren't completely drunk. Ignoring the man's sudden gaze, Jean Wan turned to leave. Xing Yihan did not drive over again. The silver-gray car stopped outside T University's gates and did not move for a long time. T University's 3 months of study were coming to an end. There were still 3 days until T University's 100th anniversary. The school's campus network suddenly encountered problems. For almost the entire day, the entire school's communication network, as well as the school's wired and wireless network, were all unusable. That night, Jean Wan found out that someone had anonymously posted the photos of Jean Wan and Mo Jingshan that day. Although the account was blocked after being posted for less than 5 minutes, to prevent the spread of gossip, Mo Jingshan, who was far away in High City, actually ordered his men to block T University's communication network for a day. The photos were nothing much. There were only some photos of Jean Wan alighting from Mo Jingshan's car and the two of them in the restaurant downstairs of Mo Corporation's company. There was nothing that could not be seen. However, the content that the person who posted the photos had written was extremely unsightly. It was completely based on groundless speculation and deliberately defamed her. It used all sorts of words like whore, seductive, shameless, third-party, coquettish, and greedy to describe Jean Wan. After Feng Ling investigated the source of the photos, she rushed into the dormitory with them. The moment Ling Feifei entered, if she had not dodged in time, her waist would have been broken by Feng Ling's kick. Ah! What are you doing? Seeing Feng Ling who had directly kicked her, Ling Feifei dodged back in fright. What am I doing? You'll find out soon enough. Feng Ling sneered as she grabbed Ling Feifei's hair. As Ling Feifei screamed in pain, she yanked her to the side with all her might. She then reached out with her other hand and tore off Ling Feifei's bedsheets. Everything on the bed fell to the ground with a crash. Ah, Jean Wan had just pushed open the door and entered when she heard endless screams. She raised her eyes to see this scene. Chapter 269. Feng Ling. If I don't sue you until all 18 generations of your ancestors cry with you, I, Ling Feifei, will write my name backwards. Ling Feifei was so angry that her face turned red. She did not even have time to feel sorry for the things that had been trampled on. She watched as Feng Ling took the camera's memory card away. She immediately screamed, even if you took the memory card, it's the same. Jean Wan is shameless. Are you afraid of these photos? Did you think I didn't make a backup somewhere else? The school's internet can't possibly be blocked forever. Even if I can't post it online, as long as you don't kill me, I still have this mouth to spread it. She had just finished speaking when Feng Ling abruptly kicked her leg. Ling Feifei instantly squatted down in pain, staring at her with a pale face in disbelief. Isn't it easy to kill you? Aren't you afraid of going to jail? She did not expect that Feng Ling would not even be afraid of such a threat. The arrogance in Ling Feifei's eyes instantly disappeared. I'm afraid the person who needs to worry about going to jail isn't Feng Ling. Jin Wan watched for a moment before walking over. Her tone was cold, mild, and calm. The crime of online defamation. Although this year, there hasn't been a clear criminal standard, it has already been written into the law. Based on the photos and words you posted today, as long as I don't wish to let you off, you can go to jail anytime. Then, seducing a married man as a third party, is that also a crime? Ling Feifei raised her eyes to glare at Jin Wan. You're very proud to have slept with a man like CEO, aren't you? You clearly know that he's already married, yet you still shamelessly stick to him. Are you afraid of others saying that you're shameless? Jin Wan, don't think that you can sleep with him with a clear conscience. Jin Wan looked at her with her eyes wide open, as if she was crazy with jealousy because she didn't get him, but still insisted on standing on the moral high ground to catch other people's stains. Jin Wan chuckled. Then I'm really sorry. Mo Jingshan and I didn't just sleep together recently. We've been sleeping together for a long time, and we sleep together, wake up together, and have breakfast together every day. I'm really at ease with that. Ling Feifei widened her eyes, staring at her in disbelief. A few seconds later, she blurted out, impossible. She didn't believe it. Jin Wan made it sound like she had known CEO Mo for a long time, not just in High City. How could this be? Jin Wan had clearly said that she had never had any contact with the Mo Corporation. How could she and CEO Mo? Jin Wan must be feeling guilty. She was afraid that she would really tell others about this, so she came to scare her. Ling Feifei stared at this exquisite, cold, and flawless face before her, and in her heart, she despised her even more. Although Jin Wan was beautiful, Ling Feifei did not believe that someone like CEO Mo would truly like her, much less maintain such a long-term relationship with her. Furthermore, Ling Feifei had heard that CEO Mo's love life had always been clean. There had never been any scandals. Jin Wan looked at her and smiled lazily. Impossible? What was impossible about it? Do you think Haicheng is so big that it can't accommodate me? Or could it be that Mo Jingshan's bed could not accommodate me? Can't the gentleman you see in front of you have a normal sex life? Could it be that he can only fall in love spiritually and doesn't need a woman to sleep with him? Ling Feifei's face flushed from her words. She couldn't tell if it was out of jealousy or anger. You can even say such shameless words. Jin Wan, how despicable must you be able to entangle yourself with CEO Mo? Although Jin Wan was already extremely annoyed with her and could not be bothered with her, those photos and slanderous words had thoroughly angered her. The curve of Jin Wan's lips deepened. She casually said, in terms of despicability, how can I compare to you, Miss Ling? You took the initiative to run to the backstage of the stadium to look for him. In the end, you couldn't bring yourself to leave and dragged me over, using the excuse that I'm from High City to get close to him. You just couldn't find a better opportunity to put your hidden thoughts into practice. You didn't even manage to touch a corner of his clothes. In the end, when you found out that I slept with him, you were so mad that you wanted to tear me apart and destroy me. But so what if you're angry? You didn't even receive a single glance from him. I'm warning you, it's fine if you jump around like a flea in front of me, but don't hang around in front of him. Let's not talk about whether you'll have the chance to hang around in front of him. Don't even think about those dirty thoughts in your heart. Otherwise, I'll only feel disgusted. I'll feel annoyed whenever I see you. The more Ling Feifei listened, the uglier her expression became. In the end, she was so angry that her hands were trembling. Jin Wan, didn't you just climb into his bed? How many times can you sleep with him? I'm afraid CEO Mo has already left T-City. After he leaves, what do you count as? If not for Fong Ling, what right do you, a shameless third party, have to stand on my head and bully me? Hearing this, Jean Wan abruptly sneered. I really admire your stubbornness. Ling Feifei was about to stand up indignantly when Fong Ling kicked her knee again. Ling Feifei immediately fell to the ground in pain. Idiot, do you know who I am? Fong Ling coldly reprimanded. Why would I care who you are? Ling Feifei glared at her with reddened eyes. Fong Ling coldly raised her brows. I'm Mrs. Mo's private bodyguard. Huh, I knew someone like you would only have the life of a bodyguard. You can't even show yourself in public. What private bodyguard? Ah, what Mrs. Mo. Ling Feifei was about to continue scolding when her complexion suddenly paled. Because of Fong Ling's identity, and because of the so-called Mrs. Mo private bodyguard? Mrs. Mo? From the moment Fong Ling appeared, she had been silently protecting Jean Wan. No matter what Jean Wan did, Fong Ling would definitely be present. Ling Feifei sat stiffly on the ground. She raised her eyes to look at Jean Wan. Jean Wan's gaze was unhurried as it landed on her. In an instant, all sorts of embarrassment and grievances surged up. Ling Feifei took a deep breath, her eyes reddening. You're all lying. How could Jean Wan be Mrs. Mo? However, when she thought about it carefully, from the moment Mo Jingshan appeared, to the time he pointed out Jean Wan's coordinates in the stadium, to the time he went to T University's cafeteria because of Jean Wan, to the time when Jean Wan ate salty fish, he gave her water. Such a natural action, and everything that happened after that, Ling Feifei looked toward Fong Ling, seeking the truth. Fong Ling only responded with a cold gaze. Looking at her, it was as though she was looking at a huge joke. Chapter 270. Bai Wei received Ling Feifei's gaze and finally spoke up. I'm not too clear about the relationship between Jean Wan and CEO Mo, but Jean Wan is the daughter of Hai Cheng's G Group. You should have known about this back then at the G family's department store. However, you refused to believe it. A bolt from the blue. Ling Feifei directly sat on the ground and did not move. Her gaze was frozen on Jean Wan for a long time. She stared at Jean Wan, who had been acting like the manager of a small studio for the past 2 months. Jean Wan tilted her head slightly, her tone light and languid. Speaking of which, Miss Ling, since you've always looked down on me, I'll play along with your arrogance. I've been here for more than 2 months, but I haven't tried to suppress you. It's almost 3 months, and we're about to go our separate ways, but you still insist on knocking into my gun. Just based on your fabricated words in these photos, I can sue you at any time. Ling Feifei was angered to the point where blood was rushing to her head. You. I don't care if you're really a third party or a fake daughter. You're in the wrong for instigating your bodyguards to beat up your roommate. If you want to sue me, fine, we'll sue each other. Don't even think of taking advantage of me. Do you have any advantages for me to take advantage of? Even if I ordered my bodyguards to beat you up, I've already reasoned with you. What about you? Did I ask you to take these photos, or did I beg you to follow me? Just these photos of us alighting from the car and having a meal, and you're able to come up with all sorts of stories. Your imagination is really rich, ah. From the start, I've never targeted you. You acting like a snob is your own problem. I don't need to trouble myself to correct your way of thinking. For the past 2 months, you've been yelling without using your brain. You've taken a few photos and posted them on the internet. I've let you off time and time again. Now, you're asking for it, understand? Jean Wan paused for several seconds. The curve on her lips deepened. Besides, you keep saying that I interfered in Mo Jingshan's marriage. You don't even know who I am. Don't you find it laughable? Ling Feifei's lips moved. However, when she saw Jean Wan's cold gaze, she recalled why someone like Mo Jingshan, who had nothing to do with the education industry, would come to T University. She finally understood. She bit her lower lip so hard that it turned white. She wanted to say something, but she couldn't. She could only sit in the corner of the dormitory with red eyes. She wanted to say that she didn't believe Jean Wan was really CEO Mo's wife, but she couldn't bring herself to say it. Fong Ling gave her a look that said, "You deserve it," and threw the camera's memory card to Jean Wan. "You said there are backups of these photos, right?" Jean Wan asked. "Then Fong Ling and I won't stand on ceremony with your computer and other electronic products in the dormitory. There aren't any backups. The only backup is this memory card." Ling Feifei choked as she spoke. She glanced at Jean Wan timidly. Jean Wan directly snapped the memory card and gave Fong Ling a look. Fong Ling picked up Ling Feifei's laptop as well. Ling Feifei was just about to stand up to snatch it back when her knees hurt so much that she fell back to the ground. She watched as Fong Ling opened her laptop and searched it. After confirming that the photos stored in the laptop had already been deleted by her guiltily, she then reformatted her laptop and tossed it back onto her bed. Only then did this matter come to an end. This matter could be considered to have come to an end with Ling Feifei. However, in the 5 minutes that the photos and posts were on the school's website, several people had seen them. For the past 2 days, some of the female students in T University had been discussing this matter in private. 2 days later, it was T University's 100th anniversary. Aside from T University's school leaders, teachers, and students, there were also many famous figures in the education world. The atmosphere tonight could be described as extremely grand. Ling Feifei no longer dared to provoke Jean Wan. She did not even dare to continue staying in the dormitory. She directly moved out. That night, she wore a gown and stood together with the other girls in Professor Lin's class, standing far away. When she saw Jean Wan, Bai Wei, and Fong Ling enter together, she only glanced in their direction. Her gaze landed on Jean Wan's gold-plated gown. With one glance, she could tell that the design was low-key and gorgeous. Everything proved that Jean Wan was indeed not the person in charge of a small studio that she had always thought she was. Ling Feifei could only suppress her anger in her heart and did not dare to approach. However, earlier on, there were already several female students quietly discussing whether Jean Wan had really become CEO Mo's mistress. No matter what, Jean Wan's face would not look too good. The moment Jean Wan appeared, the whispering voices were suppressed. However, this did not affect the female students who stood together in groups of 3 to 5. One by one, they passed on the rumors, making it seem as though the rumors were true. Their gazes that landed on Jean Wan's side were filled with disdain, doubt, and disdain. However, tonight's theme was T University's 100th anniversary. After the ceremony began, the students all stood quietly in the luxurious and spacious venue until the school leaders finished their speeches and the cocktail party began. Bai Wei, Jean Wan, and Fong Ling sat at a quiet corner on the second floor, drinking champagne and chatting. All of a sudden, Su Yao, who had always been close to Ling Feifei, intentionally spilled the glass in her hand onto Jean Wan's beautiful gown as she passed by. Thankfully, Fong Ling reacted quickly and pulled Jean Wan to the side, preventing Jean Wan's gown from being dirted. She turned to look coldly at Su Yao. "Are you seeking death?" "Yo, my hand merely slipped. It's not like the wine really spilled on her. That Ji Xiao-san hasn't even gotten angry yet. Why are you so anxious?" Su Yao sneered. Clearly, Ling Feifei did not dare to tell others about her misunderstanding of Jean Wan because of her face. Her voice was not soft, and it immediately attracted the attention of the surrounding people. Right now, the school leaders were all drinking below the stage, and there was no one to preside over the situation. In an instant, everyone's gaze landed on Jean Wan. The rumors and slanders that had been spreading ever since the school's website was blocked seemed to be hidden in the various gazes of these people. Like sharp blades, they sliced toward Jean Wan's direction. "I say, Jean Wan," from a glance, I can tell that your gown is expensive. Did CEO Mo buy it for you? As expected, you've hugged CEO Mo's thigh. You've been showing off quite a bit recently, haven't you? How does it feel to interfere in someone else's marriage? I really look down on people like you, ah. Suddenly, she felt a chill on her head, cutting off Su Yao's arrogant and cursing words. Everyone only saw a glass of champagne spilling from the top. Not a single drop was left, and all of it splashed onto her head. Then, it splashed onto her gown and dripped down. In an instant, she was in a sorry state. Su Yao raised her hand in shock to touch the wine on her head. The surrounding people were even more shocked. Chapter 271. The man stood there, dressed in a black suit. The light flashed across his body, revealing a white shirt underneath. The exquisite, expensive, and low-profile cufflinks on his wrist reflected a sharp, cold light under the light. Su Yao realized that someone had splashed wine on her. She angrily grabbed at her wet and disheveled hair, raising her head to scold, "Who is it? Who dares to splash wine on this old lady?" The security guards in the venue heard the commotion and immediately surrounded them. Ling Feifei also rushed forward, running to Su Yao's side. She was about to speak when Su Yao angrily said, "He's still upstairs. I don't know who is so daring to splash wine in a place like this. What are you security guards doing eating? Go and bring him down right now. I want to see who it is." Before she could finish her words, the man on the stairs had already started walking down. The moment she saw the man's well-ironed trousers and straight legs, Su Yao's expression faltered. She looked up carefully and saw that the man was unbuttoning his black suit jacket as he walked down. His white, handmade shirt was so clean that one could not shift their gaze away. With one glance, she could tell that it was expensive. He was only walking down the stairs. The man's steps were steady and slow. His black leather shoes were like a bright spot that attracted everyone's attention. Step by step, he walked down the stairs. The man only glanced down, allowing everyone to clearly see his handsome face that caused one's hair to stand on end. He was also wearing a white shirt, but he was not as amiable and easygoing as he had been that day in the stadium when he chatted with them. The man's clear and handsome brows and eyes indifferently swept across their bodies. His gaze was extremely calm and cold. Although he was clearly the one who had splashed the wine, his handsome face was unruffled. His eyes were deep, and as he walked down, his gaze seemed to contain a thin layer of coldness. It was actually Mo Jingshan. The crowd was in an uproar. Su Yao's curses were instantly swallowed back. The moment Ling Feifei saw Mo Jingshan, she subconsciously took a step back. Not only were the others shocked, even Jin Wan did not expect this. She turned to look at the man who had already walked down the stairs. Didn't he return to High City more than a week ago? Aren't you very busy these few days? Last night, she had even called him. Before hanging up, she had reluctantly said that she missed him. At that time, he did not mention that he would be coming to T-City to attend the school anniversary with her. She had thought that she was only wearing this gown for her to see. She did not expect that he would actually come. Feng Ling watched as the man approached. She could clearly sense the coldness emanating from Mo Jingshan's body. When those photos were randomly posted online by Ling Feifei, Feng Ling knew that Mo Jingshan would not allow Jin Wan to be bullied by these young ladies. Being banned from the school's network for a day was the lightest punishment. The debts that needed to be settled were all in the future. Under the various colored lights in the venue, the man's handsome face was blurred by the faint smoke, making him look unusually cold. Everyone looked at Mo Jingshan, including the school leaders and famous people from all walks of life. They had invited him several times but never received a positive response. They didn't expect that he would really come. Mo Jingshan approached Jin Wan. When he paused, he looked at her hand that was gripping the wine glass. His clear voice slowly said, "Pour it back." Jin Wan's expression faltered. She turned to look at the trembling Su Yao and the pale-faced Ling Feifei. Earlier, Su Yao did not actually pour the wine on her. However, if Feng Ling had not reacted quickly, it most likely would have been splashed on her. Su Yao opened her mouth and muttered, "Ceomo, aren't you being too biased towards her? Could it be that people from the upper class like you can be so high-profile even when you're having an affair?" Mo Jingshan's long and slender fingers caressed the empty wine glass in his hand. He chuckled coldly and placed the glass down. "Affair? My marriage and feelings have always followed Jin Wan's path. I've never deviated from it. How could I have an affair?" Su Yao did not understand. She looked at the calm and composed Jin Wan in confusion before turning to look at the pale-faced Ling Feifei who was hiding behind the crowd. Right now, Ling Feifei really did not dare to speak. From Mo Jingshan's words, she clearly understood the truth. Jin Wan was indeed his wife. His words could not be any clearer. A school leader could not bear to watch any longer. He furrowed his brows and said, "What are you girls thinking about all day? Miss Ji has always been CEO Mo's wife. It's just that she doesn't like being an idle rich wife at home. That's why she started her own business and took time out to learn business management. How on earth did she hinder you? Why are you making a ruckus here?" In just a few seconds, not only did Su Yao's expression change greatly, everyone who had secretly doubted and discussed Jin Wan's gossip also stared in Jin Wan's direction in disbelief. It was not that she had never been in such a crowded situation before. However, most of the people here were students who were not familiar with her. For a moment, Jin Wan was slightly uncomfortable. Mo Jingshan's hand immediately gripped hers. The moment those incredulous gazes saw the way he gripped Jin Wan's hand, they became even more astonished. No wonder Mo Jingshan would suddenly contact and cooperate with T University. It turned out that it was because Jin Wan was here. Based on this, if not for Jin Wan, T University's century-old library would not have been rebuilt so generously. After all, this was not a small sum of money. No company in the country would be willing to fork out such a sum. However, the immeasurably virtuous construction of this historical library could be said to be entirely due to Jin Wan. In an instant, the students who were unaware of the truth did not dare to speak further. Instead, they looked in their direction with envy and admiration. Only people like Ling Feifei and Su Yao felt as though there was a thorn in their backs. They could not wait to disappear from this place. "You're really CEO Mo's wife?" Su Yao was still somewhat confused. Ling Feifei, who had clearly been inciting her to target Jin Wan, was currently hiding far away. There was no way for her to seek confirmation. However, from Ling Feifei's attitude, it was likely that she already knew. That was why she was hiding so far away. "No matter who I am, even if I'm really the manager of an unremarkable small studio, it's not your place to point fingers at me." Jin Wan's red lips moved slightly. Her tone was slow and calm. "Just because I'm not Mo Jingshan's wife, I can allow you to slander me and ruin my reputation? This is all. I heard from Ling Feifei, and those photos. The photos on the school forum were all of Ling." Chapter 272. Su Yao immediately choked. She knew that she was in the wrong and did not dare to say or do anything else. She could only bite down on her lips and remain silent. However, her eyes were slightly guilty as they glanced at the wine glass in Jin Wan's hand. She was worried that Jin Wan would really pour this glass of wine on her again. Earlier, the glass that President Mo poured on her was already enough to embarrass her. If he did it again, Jin Wan glanced at the wine on the ground that Su Yao didn't pour on her and then at her. "I didn't intend to make it so big, but I'm a person who keeps a low profile when it's time to keep a low profile, and when it's time to take revenge, I'll return the favor." Su Yao immediately stiffened. She did not know what Jin Wan was planning to do. Everyone watched as Jin Wan gently swirled the wine glass in her hand and slowly approached Su Yao. She raised the glass slightly and began to pour the champagne from her waist. When the champagne flowed down her skirt bit by bit, Xiao only stood there, not daring to move. Her lips had turned white from biting down on them, and her eyes did not dare to glare at Jean Wan. Jean Wan glanced at the wine that flowed down her skirt. Her gaze suddenly shifted to Ling Feifei, who was hiding behind the school leader. It's quite a pity for this wine to flow down like this. Miss Ling, do you want to come over and drink a few drops? By drinking a few drops, it was clear that she wanted Ling Feifei to come over and drink the wine that flowed down Suyao's skirt. Just as everyone was wondering why Jean Wan was targeting Ling Feifei, Jean Wan's red lips moved slightly. Her voice was unhurried. Don't you like to secretly take photos of us, post them on the internet, and then slander us behind our backs? Such a courageous person, why are you hiding behind the school leader? Everyone's puzzled gaze immediately became clear. It turned out that the mastermind was Ling Feifei. Ling Feifei shrunk her neck and did not speak. Earlier, when Mo Jingshan was not present, she did not dare to do anything due to Jean Wan's presence. Now that Mo Jingshan was present, she did not dare to make a single sound. She just bit her lip and stood behind the school leaders. When everyone's eyes were on her, she buried her head even deeper. The school leader frowned and asked, "Did you really do such a thing?" Ling Feifei shook her head forcefully, but she did not dare to lie. In the end, she turned pleadingly toward Bai Wei behind Jean Wan, hoping that she would speak up for her on account that they were roommates. However, Bai Wei's disdainful gaze lingered on her face. In the end, she only coldly curled her lips, her gaze seemingly telling her that she deserved it. In an instant, she had mysteriously become the target of public criticism. Ling Feifei's initial goal was to make Jean Wan infamous in the school. She wanted Jean Wan to be too embarrassed to even attend the school anniversary party. In the end, this was the result. After all, this was T University's 100th anniversary. This small interlude was only a small conflict between the students. The activities for the school anniversary continued. Due to Mo Jingshan's personal arrival, the school leaders' faces were all flushed red. One by one, they introduced each other to Mo Jingshan. The last event of the school anniversary was a student-themed event. The school leaders and T University students played all kinds of indoor games, which were similar to the shiatsu massage mat that would be popular 10 years later. There was also indoor rope skipping, indoor tug-of-war, indoor doll snatching, drumming, passing flowers, and truth or dare. The laughter of all kinds of game participants rose and fell in the venue. Professor Lin's students first played tug-of-war. Jean Wan's side won one round. Next, they played indoor sprints. Jean Wan removed her shoes and stepped on the side of the massage mat. The pain immediately caused her to pull her foot back. This thing was even more powerful than the shiatsu mat 10 years later. It was made of various small stones piled together to form a sharp edge. The referee's whistle abruptly rang. Jean Wan immediately endured the pain and rushed forward. She lifted her skirt and ignored the pain in her feet as she ran forward. The finish line was less than 60 meters away. However, the pain was excruciating. After much difficulty, she finally reached the finish line. In a group of 5, Jean Wan was in second place. At the finish line, Jean Wan's feet lost balance. She abruptly fell forward and landed into an embrace. She raised her head and saw that it was Mo Jingshan. Earlier, she had been too engrossed in the game and did not notice when he had walked out of the school leader's encirclement. She also did not notice when he had arrived. Right now, Jean Wan had taken off her shoes and was barefoot in her gown. She was slightly out of place. After playing games for half a day, her forehead was covered in a thin layer of sweat. She smiled at him and used his strength to steady herself. At the same time, she suddenly felt a group of girls around them staring at her with gazes filled with envy, jealousy, and admiration. Does it hurt a lot? Mo Jingshan saw how Jean Wan had gritted her teeth in pain when she ran over. He lowered his eyes to look at her feet under her skirt in concern. It's all right, it's all right. This thing is used to massage the acupuncture points on the feet. It hurt a little when I ran, but it won't hurt anymore if I don't step on it. Jinwan rushed to put on her shoes. After playing for so long, a tug-of-war and a sprint, her heart was beating faster than usual due to the amount of exercise. It was unclear if her face was hot from the exercise or from being stared at by so many people. She stood by his side and did not participate in the other games. Anyway, playing these 2 games was enough. If she continued, she most likely would not be able to wear her gown anymore. It was too hot. Then, are you thirsty? Bai Wei perceptively brought over a glass of champagne and a bottle of mineral water. She handed them to Jinwan. Which do you want to drink? Jinwan had yet to speak when Imo Jingshan took the bottle of water from Bai Wei's hands. He nodded at her in thanks and twisted open the bottle cap, stuffing the water into Jinwan's hands. You've already drunk 3 or 4 glasses of champagne tonight. You can only drink water from now on. Jinwan knew that her alcohol tolerance was only 3 or 4 glasses. If she drank any more, she would most likely embarrass herself again. She raised the water and took a sip before releasing a long breath. She raised her hand to fan her face. Although the venue is air-conditioned, there are too many people. It's only been a few steps, but it's already so hot. Mo Jingshan watched as Jinwan's face was slightly red from the heat. His gaze deepened. At this moment, someone in the crowd was planning to take the opportunity to speak to CEO Mo and see if there were any opportunities to work together in the future. However, before he could speak, the surrounding students and school leaders who were still playing games had yet to recover from the atmosphere. In the next second, everyone heard a shrill scream. They turned to see the rumored cold and aloof CEO Mo suddenly encircling Jinwan in his arms, bending down to kiss her lips. Jinwan had yet to react and the lights in the venue suddenly shone in their direction. She subconsciously raised her eyes and saw that Mo Jingshan had blocked the blinding lights. The white light before her eyes abruptly disappeared, and the sky turned dark. The sun and moon seemed to have lost their light. Chapter 273. The surrounding crowd erupted in screams. Regardless of whether it was the students or the school's leaders, they were all stirred up. Someone from the organizer started the uproar, and the big screen in the venue, which was only used for monitoring, suddenly cut to the 2 of them, allowing everyone to clearly see the scene on the screen when Mo Jingshan suddenly took Jinwan into his arms and kissed her. Everyone was shouting, and waves of people came closer, completely surrounding them in a circle. They even raised their phones to take pictures of this scene of dog abuse. Jinwan, who was already having difficulty breathing due to the heat, instantly felt her face heat up. She subconsciously tried to push him away but was unable to do so. She was going crazy. Mo Jingshan was usually even more low-key than her. Was he abandoning his cold and aloof persona? It was one thing for him to bully Qin Sighting and Xia Tian, but this was T University's anniversary celebration. Thousands of people were present. What the hell was on the large screen? Why could she see it on the large screen? Jinwan really could not push him away. There were simply too many people around. When the man finally let her go, Jinwan directly buried her face into his shoulder, not daring to show her face again. Feng Ling, who was standing by the side, revealed a rare smile. She scanned the crowd and saw that Ling Feifei's disinterested expression was ashen, as though she had completely given up. Feng Ling finally shifted her gaze away with a cold smile. It was just a kiss. For a married couple, this was all too common. However, for many of the youthful students, especially on T University's 100-year anniversary, it was a historic moment. Mo Jingshan did not say anything to the surrounding people. He held the bashful Jinwan in his arms, holding her waist. Didn't you say that the honeymoon period is over? Why are you so shy? Jinwan's face was burning in his arms. There are too many people, Mo Jingshan, your legs have gone soft. Jean Wan, a little, Jingxian, shall I carry you back? Jean Wan, the school anniversary wasn't the most embarrassing thing. What Jean Wan was afraid of was being intercepted by a group of MO Corporation's fans or fangirls after the anniversary. Sure enough, when she went to the upper room of the venue to change out of her gown and was about to leave with Jingxian, there were already many people waiting at the main entrance of the venue. It seemed that the reporters who had tried to come in to participate in the school anniversary had heard about what had happened inside and were eagerly waiting outside to take photos of the legendary CEO MO. In the end, Jean Wan could only choose to drag Boss Missouri, who rarely made a cold and high-profile appearance, out of the venue from the side. Rather than saying that she was slipping away, it was more accurate to say that she was forcefully dragging him out from the side. The man laughed as he watched her act like a thief. Jean Wan, on the other hand, kept her waist bent, as though she was avoiding some paparazzi as she quietly walked out. The side entrance was not as wide as the main entrance. Outside was the busiest night market in T-City. The moment Jean Wan stepped out of the side entrance, she heard someone calling her name. She immediately grabbed Jingxian and ran into the crowd. As she ran, she held on to Jingxian's wrist tightly. After running for several minutes, she suddenly stopped. She placed her hands on her knees, panting heavily as though she could barely catch her breath. She then raised her hand to unbutton a few buttons on her slightly thicker jacket so that she could breathe more freely. She turned to find that this was already a relatively crowded area of the night market. People came and went, and both sides of the crowd were filled with stalls specially used for the night market. In a place like this, it was likely that they would not be able to squeeze in quickly. Even if they managed to get in, it would be difficult to find them in such a large crowd. Jean Wan released a light breath. She turned to see that one of Jingxian's hands was held tightly by her, while the other was casually placed in his pocket. He lowered his eyes to look at her panting heavily after running for several minutes and looked at her with a hint of a smile on his face. Your sports cells are so undeveloped, yet you're still trying so hard to pull me along? Jean Wan took a long time to catch her breath. She straightened her body and looked back before glancing at him from the corner of her eyes. Isn't that because we played games in the venue earlier? There were too many people, and it was too hot. You're the best. You ran so fast with me, yet you're not even panting. Seeing Jean Wan's angry expression and her slightly flushed face from running so quickly, Jingxian spoke in a heavy voice that only she could hear. With your stamina, if you don't train properly, you'll only find it harder and harder to stand in front of me in the future. She instantly understood the hidden meaning behind his words. Jean Wan raised her hand to fan the redness on her face while glaring at him. Did you specially come here to save me today, or did you do it on purpose? Jingxian smiled faintly. Originally, he was only a step away from her. All of a sudden, he took a step forward. Just as Jean Wan was about to subconsciously take a step back, he lowered his head. Jean Wan was instantly forced back by this oppressive angle. She could not help but bend her waist. At the same time, the man's arm was wrapped around her waist. He pressed her into his embrace, and her entire body was pressed into his embrace. You've gotten a bargain, yet you're still acting innocent. Who was the one who said that if the gown is too beautiful, you'll feel a little lonely attending the school anniversary alone? Ah. Did I say that? You said it with your eyes. I specially took a night to fly here. Tonight, I'll fly to High City, and tomorrow morning, I still have to fly back. It's fine that you didn't even express your gratitude, but now you're even blaming me for a kiss. Was that a kiss? There were so many people at the venue, She had yet to finish speaking when the man's lips pressed closer once more. Do you want to try kissing me here again? Jean Wan's gaze immediately shifted to the side. She saw the envious gazes of the passers-by and rushed to take a step back. She raised her hand to cover her slightly red face, feeling extremely embarrassed. But, I really didn't expect there to be a night market here. Jean Wan turned back to look at the various food and clothing stalls on both sides. She suddenly sniffed hard and furrowed her brows. What's this smell? Why is it so smelly? As she spoke, she saw two young ladies holding a few skewers of fried stinky tofu in their hands. They were eating as they walked. Jean Wan's eyes brightened. She directly approached the nearby stall selling stinky tofu. She stared at the various golden pieces that were being fried in the oil pan and asked, "Is this stinky tofu?" The owner of the oil pan handed over a skewer of stinky tofu while smiling and replying, "That's right. Little miss, do you want a skewer of stinky tofu? 2 yuan a skewer, 5 yuan 3 skewers." It did not smell much, but it looked quite delicious. Furthermore, many people really bought it. In her previous life, when Jean Wan was still in the Ji family, she rarely came to such places. She had never eaten these street stalls. In the later years, even if she had the opportunity to pass by the various night markets, she did not have the spare money to eat at the roadside stalls. Chapter 274. Jean Wan saw that there were many people who came to buy and wanted to try it even more. She turned back to look at Mo Jingshan, who was standing slightly further away because of the smell. She walked back and said with a smile, "Do you want to eat? I'll go buy a few to try together." Mo Jingshan glanced at her. "You've never eaten it before? Our lives and social circles are not connected to this place. How would we have the chance to come to the night market? Just like how you don't have the time to stroll around here. How would you have the chance to eat this? But I've often heard people say that the smelly smells delicious. I want to try it. Do you want to eat it?" Jean Wan turned to buy it as she spoke. In the end, her wrist was heavy. Mo Jingshan decisively pulled her back. "It's best if you haven't eaten it. It's not clean." "Who says it's not clean? Then aren't there many people buying it? Have you eaten it before?" "No." "Then why do you say it's not clean?" "I'll just try it. I'll buy a few." Mo Jingshan did not let her go. He single-handedly pulled her over and wrapped his arm around her back to bring her away. He then glanced at Jean Wan's resentful expression because she did not get to eat what she wanted to eat. He said firmly, "You're not allowed to eat it." Jean Wan had no choice. This kind of thing was most likely hard to tolerate in front of someone like Mo Jingshan who was obsessed with cleanliness. She turned to look at the various snacks sold at the roadside stalls. As she walked, she said pitifully in a small voice, "I've never eaten any of these before. You won't let me try any of them. Earlier at the venue, I only drank 3 glasses of champagne and didn't eat anything else. Right now, I'm starving. If you're hungry, go back and eat. I'll make dinner, En." In the end, even if Great Boss Missouri said he would personally cook, it was useless. Look at this lamb skewer. It smells especially good. And that numbing and spicy skewer, there's even glutinous rice cake. Mo Jingshan, Great Boss Missouri, CEO Mo, Mr. Mo. "Hubby, just let me buy some to try. I'll only eat a little." In the end, under Jean Wan's coaxing and pestering, Mo Jingshan finally got her to buy a small bag of handmade chocolate biscuits and a few pieces of glutinous rice pancakes. As for the other fried and barbecued foods, they were completely forbidden. She wasn't allowed to eat them. There were many people here, and the light was dim. Jean Wan stood in the crowd and quickly stuffed a piece of glutinous rice cake into her mouth. She smiled with satisfaction. As expected, the snacks in the night market live up to their reputation. So sweet. Mo Jingshan glanced at her as though she was a gluttonous child. He allowed her to follow behind and eat as she walked. He held her hand and led the way. They planned to walk out of the night market before turning to the main entrance of the venue. Jean Wan stuffed another piece into her mouth, filling it to the brim. Her face was puffed up as she smiled at the tall and straight figure in front of her. For Mo Jingshan to pass by such a place, she felt as though he was being dragged down from the clouds to the mortal world. Of course, it was unavoidable that the young ladies who passed by nearby would constantly throw their love-struck gazes in their direction. Jean Wan saw that Imo Jingshan was so low-key and quiet as he walked through the crowd, yet he was still so eye-catching. She could only wipe her mouth and quickly follow him, obediently following by his side. Wait a minute. Jean Wan saw that there were many clothes hanging in the stall by the side. Most importantly, there was one that she had worn in her previous life. For some reason, her heart skipped a beat. She called out to Mo Jingshan and subconsciously turned to walk over. The owner of the roadside stall saw her approach and enthusiastically asked, "Which one do you want?" "My family's clothes are all bought from big shopping malls. They're all from big brands that have been abandoned. Every one of them is of good quality. Miss, if you like them, you can choose any." Jean Wan picked up a white t-shirt with a simple design printed on it. "How much is this?" "This one, ah." The roadside stall owner glanced at the clothes she was wearing. The quality was not bad, and the price would not be too low. He directly said, 280. Mo Jingshan stood behind and raised his brows. He discovered that Jean Wan was especially interested in these roadside stalls tonight. 280? Jean Wan smiled. Did this owner think that she did not know what was good? That's right. 280, no bargaining. 60, are you selling it? The owner had never seen someone haggle so fiercely. His gaze immediately shifted to Jean Wan's body, and he coughed. That's too little. 150. Jean Wan sneered and placed the t-shirt in his hands. 60 yuan. If you don't want to sell it, then forget it. She then turned to leave. The owner originally thought that he would be able to scam off a rich customer. He did not expect that this young lady would not fall for it. He rushed to say, all right. Can I add another 10 yuan? It's not easy for me to do business. Jean Wan did not turn back. Just 60. All right. 60. The owner helplessly called her back, handing the shirt over. Jean Wan finally turned back with a smile. She suddenly felt Mo Jingshan's human-shaped credit card machine approach her from behind. She rushed to say, I can't swipe my card here. I'll pay in cash. Anyway, it's only 60 yuan. Mo Jingshan lowered his eyes to glance at her sparkling eyes that were smiling from successfully haggling. He was strangely infected, and the light in his eyes gently landed on her head. T-City's night was not as cold as High City's winter. The air was only slightly chilly, and the people coming and going reduced the chill by several degrees. The surroundings were bustling with activity. Especially the night market, which was hung high up with colorful lanterns. It was extravagant and tacky, yet exceptionally down-to-earth, symbolizing the warmth and excitement of this place. How is it? Does it look good? Jean Wan gestured the shirt in front of her. Mo Jingshan watched her happy expression, and the corners of his lips curved up. He chuckled softly. You've never come into contact with a place like a night market before. Tonight, aside from the snacks, you're actually especially interested in these clothes? Jean Wan's head leaned against his arm. It's not that I'm interested in the clothes, but I'm especially interested in haggling with these roadside stall owners. Let me tell you, I've already gone easy on him earlier. Otherwise, I could have bought this shirt for 40 yuan. In her previous life, she had worn the exact same, ordinary cotton t-shirt. Back then, she had spent 40 yuan on it. Mo Jingshan sighed and smiled at her sudden desire to haggle. It's not like you haven't worn high-quality t-shirts that cost tens of thousands of yuan. Are you sure you want to wear this? It's not like I haven't worn it before, Jean Wan softly muttered. Mo Jingshan's footsteps paused, lowering his eyes to look at her. What did you say earlier? Chapter 275. Seeing that Mo Jingshan clearly did not want to eat it, Jean Wan brought the biscuit closer to his mouth. Just one bite. The man had already given in to her childish actions countless times. This time, he unsurprisingly gave her face and ate the biscuit. How is it? Does it taste good? It's all right. Boss Missouri meant that it did not taste bad. It could also be interpreted as delicious. Mo Jingshan naturally knew that she was gloating right now and let her be. When the two of them walked out of the night market, it was already very late. The night market was very long. Although Jean Wan had brought daily clothes that could be used to change into her gown, she was still wearing the pair of high heels that matched her gown. Her feet were already aching when they ran out of the venue. After walking such a long night market, her feet were in so much pain that they did not feel like they belonged to her. Did you come straight to the venue after landing? Didn't you drive? Jean Wan looked at the crowd and cars at the end of the night market. It seemed like it was difficult to hail a taxi here because there were too many people. I didn't drive. Then how are we going back? Jean Wan looked at the sea of people. There were almost no empty cabs. This was not T University. It was just a venue in the city center that T University had chosen to hold its 100-year anniversary celebration. From here to T University and the condominium, it would take at least half an hour to hail a taxi. However, it was impossible to hail a taxi here. There aren't many people at the plaza by the main entrance. It's more convenient to hail a taxi. The plaza by the main entrance? Jean Wan turned back to look in the direction of the venue. This place was already very far away. If they were to circle to the main entrance, she would see the long streets and streetlights in the distance. Her feet began to hurt even more. Mo Jingshan lowered his head to take a look. Your feet hurt? It's all right. These high heels that match the gown are slightly higher than normal shoes. It's not convenient to walk, Jean Wan answered casually. The man smiled mildly. Seeing that she was clearly in so much pain that she did not have the courage to continue walking, yet still wanted to save her face, his thin lips curved into a light smile. It's not like I'll laugh at you if you say it hurts. Why are you still trying to act tough? What else can I do if I don't act tough? I can't possibly sleep on the streets, right? Furthermore, my apartment is in T City, which isn't too far away. There's no need for me to stay in a nearby hotel. Besides, I don't have my ID card with me, so I can't even enter the hotel. Jean Wan carried the small bags in her hands and raised her leg, attempting to relieve the pain in the soles of her feet. And it's already so late. Even if I call your driver over, he's probably already resting. I'd better take a taxi. Before she could finish speaking, she suddenly paused, because the tall man had already squatted down in front of her. Come up. Jean Wan looked at the crowd around her, then at the square far away from the main entrance of the venue, and then at the man squatting in front of her. Her lips curved into a sweet smile, and without a word, she leaned over his back. Mo Jingshan carried her on his back, striding forward. His steps were neither fast nor slow, steady and orderly. Jean Wan wrapped her arms around his neck and pressed her face against the back of his neck. Have you carried anyone before? There was a hint of amusement in the man's voice. Of course not. Your fiancée in America didn't carry her either, did she? No. Jean Wan wanted to ask more, but she remembered that he had previously returned to America to resolve this matter. Right now, there was indeed no need to mention this person, although she still did not know who that American woman was. She rubbed her face against his ear, asking softly, Am I heavy? He smiled mildly. How heavy do you think you are? I usually eat quite a lot. Previously, I ate so much that I almost thought I was really pregnant. My weight must have increased by a few pounds. As she spoke, she hugged his neck tightly and lowered her eyes to look at the cheap white t-shirt in the bag in her hands. That was the t-shirt she often wore in her previous life when she was so poor that she could not even afford to buy clothes that cost 100 yuan. She asked softly, You're so good to me. You don't even let me experience the slightest bit of pain and suffering. I'm almost spoiled to the point of becoming a glass princess. The kind that will shatter the moment I touch the ground. After a moment of silence, the man smiled mildly. By my side, what you don't need to experience the most is the pain and suffering of the world. Jean Wan murmured, is this an honor that only belongs to Mrs. Mo? It belongs to you. It belongs to Jean Wan. Jean Wan leaned against the man's shoulder, her lips curling up. Belong to her? The woman pressed her face against the man's, whispering against his warmth, so, why is it me? He did not speak. Mo Jingshan. N. On the long street at night, the two had already walked far away from the liveliness of the night market. However, there were still cars passing by quickly. The distance between the quiet and the liveliness seemed to have been separated by the two of them. The world was vast, but the only thing in her world was his warm back. You must have secretly fallen for me when I wasn't aware of it, right? Otherwise, how could you have agreed to marry me so easily, and how could you have always treated me so well? The tall and straight man smiled. He did not reply and continued to walk forward with her on his back. You've been carrying me for so long. Are you tired? Tired. Then let me get down and walk by myself. It's not far from here to the plaza. The man did not put her down. Instead, his grip on her body tightened. Lie down properly. Don't move. You already said you're tired, you haven't stopped talking the entire way. I'm tired from chatting with you. He actually disliked her for talking too much. When the two returned home, Jean Wan rushed to change out of her shoes. Only then did she feel much more relaxed. After showering, Mo Jingshan lowered his head to kiss her face. Nuan. My flight is back to High City tomorrow morning. I'll be flying overseas the day after. After pausing for several seconds, he calmly added, I'll be back soon. When you finish your classes next week, I'll come straight to T-City to pick you up. Jean Wan nodded. After a moment, she hesitantly made an "oh" sound. She felt that most of the things Mo Jingshan was busy with were not in the country. Furthermore, it had been a long time since she heard any news about Nanhang. Feng Ling's lips were also tightly sealed. She did not know what exactly Mo Jingshan was busy with. I'm worried about you returning to High City alone. Be good and stay in the condo for the next few days. Wait for me to come back next week. Have Feng Ling pack your things, and I'll come to pick you up, Jean Wan did not question further. All right. Chapter 276. Jean Wan nodded obediently. For some strange reason, she felt that Mo Jingshan's words today were much more than any other time. Where are you flying to this time? America? Or Japan? She asked subconsciously. He touched her hair and said softly, when I come back, I'll bring you a local gift. You'll know. A few days later, Jean Wan received a call from Ji Hongwen. It had been 10 days since Ji Mengran disappeared. Ji Hongwen's voice was lower and older than usual. He didn't sound too depressed, but Jean Wan knew that he hadn't been eating or sleeping well recently. Today was the anniversary of Jean Wan's mother's death. It had been so many years, and the sadness had been covered by time. Jean Wan habitually looked at the sky for a long time on this day, and then she received a call from Ji Hongwen. Nuan, Dad knows that you don't want to ask me too much because of Mengran. There are many truths that I plan to hide from you for the rest of my life. You will always be my daughter, and I'm not going to tell you those things until I die. If you don't want to tell me, I won't force you. Jean Wan replied, I don't plan to find my biological father or recognize him as my biological father, and now Mengran's matter is pressing on your heart. You don't need to, it doesn't matter. Now that things have come to this point, deliberately hiding it will only cause harm. Your mother has been gone for many years. I couldn't hide what she told me. I didn't expect that Mengran would know and come to you to slander you. Ji Hongwen sighed heavily. Before your mother married me, she had a past. It was a past that she was forced into. She didn't love your biological father. Back then, I was also a young man who sacrificed my life for love. Even though your mother was pregnant, I still married her without hesitation. I promised to treat you as my own daughter. Nguan, I watched you grow up. This father-daughter relationship is no different from the relationship between me and Mengran. Do you understand? I understand, Dad. Jinwan didn't expect that after so many days of silence, Ji Hongwen finally decided to tell her the truth. Now the burden on her heart was much lighter. At least she was no longer the only one who was kept in the dark. As for who your biological father is, maybe you will never meet him again in this life. Even if you meet him, I'm afraid he will never know of your existence. I don't intend to repeat these old stories too much. After all, it happened more than 20 years ago, and it's all about your mother's resentment. It has nothing to do with you. Nguan, I don't know. Jinwan's eyes were filled with tears. Dad, I've never denied your existence. We are the same as before. I won. And you won. And Ji won. And you won, right? Jinwan's eyes welled up with tears. Dad, I've never denied your existence. We're still the same as before. I won't change, and you won't change, right? Yes. Ji Hongwen's voice was a bit hoarse from excitement. Good girl, I know Mengran is wrong. She has made many mistakes, and I have never been biased towards anyone. However, I have not heard from her for a long time. My mood has been affected, but I don't mean to ignore you. You are always my most beloved daughter. I know. Jinwan's nose felt sour. She raised her hand to rub it, trying not to choke. She knew that Ji Hongwen had deliberately chosen this day to make things clear to her. Fortunately, there had never been any deep estrangement between father and daughter. Between people, the most terrible thing was to say nothing. Ji Hongwen said a few more words before hanging up. Jinwan held her phone and stood by the window, looking out for a long, long time. Who was her biological father? Perhaps she would never meet him in this lifetime. Even if they met, the other party wouldn't know of her existence. When her mother was young, she was a very quiet and gentle woman. Jinwan was too young to know much about her mother's past, but she really couldn't figure out how she could have been forced to marry someone before she got married. What kind of coercion was it? Was she forced to marry by force, or was she forced to marry by her elders? Or were there other possibilities? Ji Hongwen clearly did not intend to talk about these things. He only called to comfort her and tell her that nothing would change between them. He wanted to keep her as his daughter, and Jinwan also wanted to keep the family she had lived in since she was young. Professor Lin's class only lasted for 3 months. This class ended before T University's graduation season. Although the short 3 months was not as long as other people's years, Jinwan could be considered to have made a friend like Bai Wei. On the eve of their departure, the students in Professor Lin's class had a rare gathering. Although Feng Ling was a transfer student, she went along. Jinwan did not drink. She sat on the sofa and chatted with Bai Wei. She talked about her experiences in the past 3 months and the possibility of working with Bai Wei's company in the future. Feng Ling had never participated in such an occasion before. She only occasionally looked at her phone and watched Jinwan, not allowing her to drink. This class had a simple beginning and a simple ending. However, the process was exciting. Ling Feifei kept avoiding Jinwan and sat far away from her. Feng Ling would occasionally raise her brows and glance at Ling Feifei, intentionally using her gaze to scare her. Ling Feifei was so frightened that she quickly used the excuse of feeling unwell to slip away. She did not dare to stay any longer. Jinwan left T University with the results of her final test. The next day, she packed her luggage with Feng Ling in the condominium. Mo Jingshan said that he would pick her up and bring her back to High City today. She did not know if he would fly directly to T-City or return to High City first before coming over. Jinwan did not have much luggage, but it took her a long time to pack. She waited from dawn until afternoon, but Mo Jingshan did not appear. For the entire day, she did not receive any calls from Mo Jingshan. What time is it? Jinwan locked the 2 suitcases and stood up, clapping her hands as she asked Feng Ling in the living room. It's past 5, Feng Ling replied. Only then did Jinwan notice the passage of time. She turned to see that it was already evening and picked up her phone to look at the time. There were only messages from Xia Tian and Xiao Ba on her phone. They asked if she was returning to High City today or tomorrow and said that they wanted to arrange a welcome banquet for her. Her messages were bustling with activity. Many people had sent her various messages. However, there was no news from Mo Jingshan. Time passed bit by bit. 6 o'clock. Mo Jingshan did not appear, nor did he call. 7 o'clock. There was still no sign of Mo Jingshan. At 10 o'clock, her phone was silent. There was no sound of anyone opening the door. Jinwan tried to call Mo Jingshan, but all she heard was a cold, robotic female voice indicating that the other party was not in the service area and could not be reached. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.